Chapter 854. However, seeing Beligaju like this, Hellion Vivian was even more worried. It was just that her worry was hidden very deep. Even Beligaju didn't notice. The two returned to the palace. The battle of the capital city became famous. The civil and military officials knelt in the main hall, their wide sleeves spread on the bright marble floor, their heads touching the ground, and shouted, "Welcome back to the palace, Your Highness." This year was the most glorious year of the War Dragon Empire. The retired emperor's illness was not serious. Instead, after being poisoned by the Grand Tutor and Vivian exorcised the evil spirit for him, his violence was reduced a lot, and he gained a few more years of life. However, for some reason, Nangong Lai was not in the palace. After all, if he was here, such a big thing would not have happened in the capital city. After asking in detail, she found out that the retired emperor was worried about Beligaju and Hellion Vivian who went to the ancient tomb, so he asked Nangong Lai to go to the hidden spirit temple personally. Originally, he wanted to ask the master to come out of the mountain, but now it seemed that there was no need. The capital city returned to peace, and the resentment that once shrouded the palace was also eliminated. The seal was resealed. Although there were still some demons and evil spirits in the world occasionally, it was still much more peaceful than before. Seeing this, Hellion Vivian had the idea of letting Beligaju be close to the babies again. After eating, she pulled his hand over and pressed it on her stomach. Beligaju let her fiddle with it. Sometimes, he would hold her like this, holding a scroll in one hand and touching her stomach with the other. It looked like he was touching a fox. Unfortunately, this fox didn't know how to roll. Bailey Jiaju put down the scroll in his hand, leaving his other hand free. He directly pulled her into his arms and said in a deep voice with a smile in his eyes, "Do you want me to teach you how to play chess?" "I don't want to play chess recently." Hellion Vivian took his hand and played with it twice. As if thinking of something, she suddenly smiled, "I got it." Beligaju hugged her and raised his eyebrows. "What? Let's do a face mask together. What do you think?" Hellion Vivian's smile deepened. "With a face like yours, it will definitely be very interesting to wear a facial mask." Beligaju refused to comment. He took the teacup and took a sip. "It's a woman's thing again." "What do you mean by a woman's toy?" "In our world, men also wear facial masks, okay?" When Hellion Vivian thought of this idea, she became excited. When she didn't have a boyfriend in the modern world, she never thought that one day she would live with someone for so long. Perhaps, she simply could not imagine that there would be a man who would pamper her so wantonly. Sometimes, he would suddenly feel very lucky. She had met such a man. He had a venomous tongue, he was ruthless, he was elegant, he was cold-blooded, he was rebellious, he was not controlled by anyone, but he had tied the red string to her hand. He would still mock her and take pleasure in hurting her. He always knocked her on the head and said she was stupid. But when they were sleeping, they would protect her very well. He was afraid that she would press her stomach when she turned over at night. Obviously, Beligaju didn't want to hear her talk about their world. It felt like she didn't belong here. Therefore, when Hellion Wei was about to leave him, Bailey Jiaju subconsciously grabbed her and gripped her slender wrist tightly in his palm. He could not even control his anger. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. "I'm going to make a facial mask. You wait for me here. It will be done soon. If you need anything, ask Eunuch's son to get it. Don't you think your actions are not stupid enough?" Beligaju hugged her back again. His expression was very cold. He didn't want to let go at all, as if he was asking for something. Hellion Vivian liked to be hugged by him like this, so she didn't move again. Eunuch's son saw them loving each other. He smiled until his eyes almost disappeared. "Your Highness is right. If you need anything, just tell this old servant." The tributes sent by the Western region a few days ago are still here. This old servant will bring them all for the princess. The Western region. Hellion Vivian smiled. Then bring some pearls. There's no need for the rest of the treasures. Also, bring 2 empty bowls, a jar of honey, some fresh milk and tomatoes. Eunuch's son responded with a yes and left with the palace servants. It could also be considered to give the 2 some time alone. His Highness had never liked people to wait on him. In the past, he didn't like people touching him. Now, he didn't like people disturbing him and the princess. His Highness was still that His Highness, so sinister that it made people scared. But as long as Wang Fei was here, he would have a bottom line and would not reveal the deepest part of him. This was the biggest blessing for the Dragon War Empire. Thinking back, how many people thought that the good-for-nothing miss of the Hellion family was not worthy of the high and mighty third prince? Until now, many people were talking about the existence of these 2 legends in the Dragon War Empire. One was the third prince, Beligaju. The other was the third princess consort, Hellion Vivian. Seeing that the little Highness was about to be born, Eunuch's son smiled even more happily. He quickly prepared all the things that Hellion Vivian wanted. Hellion Vivian didn't mind. She rolled up her long sleeves and picked up a pair of chopsticks to mix. She put whatever she thought of into the bowl. After all, it was for the sake of consistency. Milk, honey, pearl powder, tomatoes. Each of these things is a tool for whitening and moisturizing. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian picked up the bowl and said to Beligaju, "Go lie down on the small couch. I'll apply it faster." Bailey Jiaju was amused by her matter-of-fact tone. He mischievously pulled her over and kissed her ear. His breath was hot as he said, "Do you only need me to lie down? You don't need this husband to do anything to cooperate with you." "No need." After Hellion Vivian said this, she remembered the scene last night. Because they couldn't be intimate, he held her hand. That pair of eyes was very deep in the darkness. He kept kissing her neck. When he came out, he bit her collarbone heavily. That kind of heat seemed to still remain on her hand. "If you look at this husband like this, it will make this husband feel that you are being sarcastic." Beligaju hugged Hellion Vivian from behind. Hellion Vivian smiled and pushed him away. "You want to use this trick to divert my attention. I won't fall for it. Hurry, go lie down over there." Seeing her like this, Beligaju let her do as she pleased. Eunuch's son was a discerning person. He secretly gave the palace servant a look and put down the translucent barrier. Bailey Jiaju laid down with his clothes on and watched her smear her face with her fingers. The thing was cool and very comfortable. But he didn't know how she would smear it in the end. Chapter 855. Hey, don't move. If you move, there will be wrinkles. Hellion Vivian was having a good time. She felt a sense of achievement when she thought about how she could paint such a handsome face. Beligaju looked at her smiling eyes, rubbed his forehead helplessly, and continued to lie down. Not bad. After Hellion Vivian was done, she nodded at Beligaju. His Highness had never been modest. "I've always been good-looking. I'm saying that my skills are good." Hellion Vivian lowered her head and kissed him on the lips. Her smile grew wider. Beligaju didn't expect her to suddenly attack him, so he wanted to pull her back. Hellion Vivian shouted, "Hey, hey, hey, you still have something on your face. Don't rub it on my face. I'll do it too. Lie down. I'll do it for you." Beligaju ignored her objections and pressed her down on the small couch. Then, he copied what she had just done and smeared the thing on Hellion Vivian's face bit by bit. However, compared to Hellion Vivian's sudden attack, His Highness kissed her much more frequently. Basically, he just smeared the thing on her face and kissed her. He looked very casual, and even pinched Helene Vivian's hand from time to time. Helene Vivian. She wasn't a cat. Did she need him to pinch her paws from time to time? Are you done? Helene Vivian couldn't lie down anymore. Beligaju looked at her and frowned. So this is how it looks after it's done. Don't frown. There will be wrinkles. Helene Vivian kept talking about wrinkles. Bailey Jiaju did not care about her anymore. He took the bronze mirror and looked at his own face. His eyebrows twitched. It was not good looking at all. How did she manage to kiss him when he looked like this just now? Wait, don't apply it yet. Helene Vivian pressed down on his hand and grinned. It's not time yet. It'll take at least half an incense stick's worth of time. You have to wait for the nutrients inside to slowly seep in. In other words, he still had to carry this mess for half an incense stick worth of time. Beligaju was about to go crazy. However, His Highness had always had a noble temperament. He reached out and pulled her over. I have never been so ugly. How could he be ugly? He's very handsome, Helene Vivian said as she tried to hold back her laughter. Beligaju raised his eyebrows. Is it funny? No. Helene Vivian met the man's narrowed eyes. Really? Beligaju curled his thin lips. Do you think this highness will believe you? Of course you have to believe me, because no matter what you become, I will still like you. Helene Vivian knew that usually at this time, as a domineering president, she had to use sweet words to kill the crisis in the cradle. Therefore, it was really not a good thing to say that the other half was too strong. Fortunately, she was also strong. Yes. She nodded with incomparable confidence. When Bailey Jiaju saw her like this, he knew that she had found herself in the wrong place again. He leaned his head on her shoulder and laughed softly. The two of them didn't say anything. They just lay on the small bed and waited for the mask on their faces to be done. Helene Vivian was quite romantic sometimes. She took out the small book that Beligaju had given her in the Buddhist world and seriously wrote a note on it. It feels good to put on a mask with the person I love. Bailey Jiaju reached out and took the book from her. He glanced at it and asked, "What are you writing?" Helene Wei knew that no one could recognize her handwriting, so she purposely explained it to him. This was also a kind of behavior of a bossy president. How could she not tell her other half what she was being romantic about after being romantic? What a loss. When Bailey Jiaju heard her words, his expression was hard to fathom as he looked at the circles and crosses on the surface. Helene Wei, don't tell me that those two ghostly characters on the surface are beloved. What ghost-like characters? This is my self-created calligraphy. If you don't know how to appreciate it, don't talk nonsense. Helene Vivian took the book and put it away properly. Then she went back to her original place to lie down. Beligaju couldn't help it, and a smile overflowed from his thin lips. Helene Vivian was still a little annoyed. Don't think that she didn't know what he was laughing about. Wasn't it just that her handwriting was a little too ugly? In fact, Beligaju wasn't laughing about this, but her serious expression. Just like when they were in Buddhism, she was obviously very smart, but sometimes she was so silly that people just wanted to hold her tighter. When little Seven walked in from outside with the food, he saw this scene and was somewhat stunned. Third brother. Third sister-in-law. Helene Vivian saw little Seven come in and smiled. Little Seven, you haven't seen your third brother like this, right? Isn't he handsome? The little seventh prince really couldn't see anything handsome from that pale face. He just threw the food in his hand forward and said in a tiger-like manner, "This is for third sister-in-law." Helene Vivian looked at the red flame beast under her feet and was silent. Beligaju glanced at them indifferently. Your third sister-in-law doesn't eat this mess. Take it out and eat it yourself. Mess. Little Seven lowered his head and looked into the red flame beast's eyes. He muttered, "Is it because it's not good-looking?" The red flame beast. Damn it. Not only do you want to eat me, but you also complain that I'm not good-looking. Little Seven didn't care about what the red flame beast was thinking. Since third brother and third sister-in-law didn't like it, he couldn't waste the food. He turned around and swallowed the red flame beast in one gulp, leaving only the red flame beast's tail sweeping back and forth around his mouth. Little Seven directly bit his teeth and swallowed everything. He felt for a while and said, "It doesn't taste good." The red flame beast let out a final howl. "I've been eaten by you, what else do you want?" The little seventh prince had never interacted much with food. After he finished eating, he passed the small school bag he was carrying to Helian Wei Wei and said, "I got this from the dean. It's for the baby." The small bag was full of first-class Tianshan snow lotuses. This time, the dean would be so angry that his lungs would explode. This time, Bailey Jia Ju accepted the gift and fed one to Helian Wei Wei. Then, he lectured her, "You can bring the rest of the things from the dean's place here." Little seventh prince nodded seriously with a fierce expression on his face. After he finished listening to Bailey Jia Ju's words, he immediately carried his small school bag on his back, intending to carry out the second round of wiping out. Eunuch's son desperately stopped him outside. "Seventh prince, you can't go anymore. I heard that Dean Tusu accidentally broke 2 colored glaze cups. He's looking for you all over the palace." Eunuch's son said and shouted into the palace, "Royal family, quickly control the seventh prince." Chapter 856. Helian Vivian listened to the noise outside and thought, if Eunuch's son knew that all of this was ordered by a certain highness, I wonder if Eunuch's son would go crazy. Looking at Beligaju like this, Helian Vivian's eyes were softer than ever. When it came to hobbies, a certain highness' only hobby was to prank people. Now that she saw him smile like this, Helian Vivian never felt that he was cruel. On the contrary, she always felt that this man was the cleanest. Whether it was when they were in the 33 heavens or in the human world, he had never changed the way he treated her. In the past, both of them were very proud. Neither of them was willing to admit defeat. It was the same now. However, compared to when they were young, they knew how to cherish each other more now. No matter what she did, he would follow her. However, just as the master of the Hidden Spirit Temple once said, if one's love was too exclusive, it would usually lead to destruction under normal circumstances. It was night, on the 7th floor of the underworld. The little king of hell held a pacifier in his mouth and sneered at his father, "If you have the ability, beat me to death. Even if you beat me to death, I can still fly in the sky and burrow into the earth, humph. Do you think I won't dare to do anything to you?" The king of hell was handsome, but at first glance, one could tell that he was not a good person. He was a bit like someone who came out of a brothel and was very wild. The little king of hell crossed his legs, hit me, I'll scream, call mom over, let her see the true face of a brothel head like you." Slap. As if he could not hold it in anymore, the veins on the king of hell's forehead bulged out. "Lord, king of hell, don't be angry with the little highness, he also made a mistake. The judge was usually stuttering, and this time, he couldn't speak clearly. He lay on the ground and desperately hugged the king of hell's leg, afraid that his lord would beat the little highness up until he couldn't take care of himself in life. The little highness, of all people, had to mention the madam. Wasn't this specifically picking on Darren's wound to poke? The king of hell took a deep breath as he reached out and grabbed the little king of hell. He lifted the little boy with his legs up and his head down. The little king of hell felt that his dignity had been deeply insulted. Dad, how can you be so shameless? If you have the ability, put me down. What the hell are you doing hanging me on a hanger? Am I your son or not? Mother. Mom, come over quickly. Dad is abusing me again. Mom. After calling out a few times, the little king of hell realized that something was wrong. Why wasn't his mother here yet? The judge stammered as he whispered into his ear. Madam was angered by Lord and left. Damn, why didn't you say so earlier? The little king of hell rolled his amber eyes and said to the king of hell, Dad, I feel that I'm not young anymore. There are some things that we can sit down and talk about, right? If you hang me like this, it'll affect the relationship between us father and son. I think this is pretty good. The king of hell didn't fall for his son's tricks at all. He instructed the people around him, just let him hang like this. Doesn't he like to shout? Let him shout as much as he wants. Hearing this, the little king of hell widened his eyes. Seeing that his father had finished packing and was going to chase after his mother, he kicked his short legs and felt very sad and angry in his heart. Hellion Vivian pushed open the door and saw this scene. The little king of hell was already very beautiful, especially his eyes. When he smiled, they seemed to glow like rubies. Although it was a little sinister, he still looked like a little angel. Now that he was being hung on a hanger like a piece of clothing, it was funny no matter how one looked at it. Hi. The little king of hell was very gentlemanly. Although he didn't greet her with his hands, his mouth didn't stay idle. Do you want to drink tea or mangoes soup? Hellion Vivian didn't have any intention of putting the little king of hell down. She looked for a ledger and glanced at it. Then, she paused and raised her head to ask, Where's my book of life and death? Your book of life and death? When the little king of hell heard this question, he smiled meaningfully. Phoenix, why did you suddenly come to the underworld to look for your book of life and death? Don't tell me you're hiding something from that man. Hellion Vivian looked at the little king of hell who was hanging on the hanger and smiled. You should understand that sometimes, being too smart isn't a good thing at all. Alright, but your book of life and death isn't in the underworld at all. At this point, the little king of hell paused and said, Even if it is, I don't have the right to look at it. Hellion Vivian walked closer to him and looked into his big eyes. If you didn't say the last sentence, I would have thought that the book of life and death didn't exist in the underworld. To be precise, it doesn't exist. The little king of hell smiled slyly, because strictly speaking, it's not the book of life and death at all. It's a record of the gods and Buddhists. In addition, you're a variable between heaven and earth. A variable means that even if there's a record, it will change accordingly. Hellion Vivian paused, then where's the record? It's said to be in the 18th level of hell, but you don't have to go there. You won't be able to see it. The little king of hell didn't seem to be lying. He kicked his legs again and said, I can't see it either. Only the one with the surname Pei can see it. He was the one who placed it in the Hades. Now, I don't know where that person went. Hellion Vivian listened quietly. She reached out and put the little king of hell down. Then, she walked out of the door and went straight to the 18 levels of hell. The little king of hell was naturally worried about her going alone. He brought his axe and followed her. The blood sea was gone, so the evil spirits in the 18 levels of hell were naturally gone as well. However, this place was exceptionally gloomy. From time to time, one could hear sorrowful voices coming from all directions. The record that the little king of hell mentioned was easy to find. It was placed in the blood pool of the 18 levels of hell. The record was made of bamboo. The scroll was very long, so long that when Hellion Vivian opened it, she couldn't see the end of it. However, Hellion Vivian really couldn't see anything because there was nothing written on it. When Hellion Vivian was still young in Buddhism, she heard Sakya mention that there was a record in the world called Mysteries of Heaven. On the surface, this Mysteries of Heaven looked like a bamboo scroll. However, in reality, the person who owned it could see the direction of the gods and Buddhas. Hellion Vivian couldn't see it. She had to find the one with the surname Pei. However, just like what the little king of hell said, within the sixth Tao, unless he appeared voluntarily, no one could find him. The little king of hell saw that she was really anxious. He comforted her with a pacifier in his mouth. Although I don't know why you're so uneasy, what Bodhi did should be able to help you break your destiny. Hellion Vivian understood what the little king of hell said. However, in the last scene in Buddhism, she saw the phoenix's death in the light of smelting fire. Chapter 857. Hellion Vivian didn't want to think too much about it. But since she had seen it, she couldn't pretend that she didn't see it. But this was the only thing she couldn't let him know. Hellion Vivian went to the hidden spirit temple. This was the only time she went out alone after the world was peaceful. On the surface, she went to pray for blessings. In fact, she had been using this opportunity to look for a man with the surname Pei. However, just like what the King of Hell's son had said, no one could find this man unless he was willing to appear. This time, when the master saw her, he wasn't as happy as before. Instead, he looked at her and stopped the wooden fish in his hand. "Girl, are you hiding something from His Highness?" "Yes, there is." At this point, she had to take measures. In fact, even Hellion Vivian didn't know if the so-called measures would work. But she had to let someone know, "I may not be able to escape this disaster. If that happens, I hope you can tell him for me that even if I leave, my child will be with him." When the master heard Hellion Vivian's words, the wooden fish in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. At that time, Hellion Vivian's belly was already very big. In fact, even walking was a little clumsy. But she still came, one step at a time. She looked at the master and said, "He does like to kill people, but he is just spoiled. I don't want him to be alone, and I don't want people to judge him as a tyrant. I hope that the master can think of a way to make him feel better after I leave." The master looked at Hellion Wei's face and shook his head. He let out a long sigh and said, "Girl, you still don't understand. You're the only one he cares about in this world. Other than you, no one can control him." How could Hellion Wei not understand the great master's words? She rubbed her lower abdomen. Her eyes were red, but her back was very straight. "Back to the palace." These were the last two words Hellion Vivian said in the hidden spirit temple. She was becoming more and more like an empress, but Beligaju had never ascended the throne. No matter how the Grand Emperor Emeritus provoked him, he still sat there indifferently. When the Grand Emperor Emeritus was thirsty, he slowly raised his head and glanced at the sky outside the window. She should be back soon. When he finished speaking, he planned to stand up and leave. The retired emperor was so angry. Looking at the grandson that gave him the most headaches, his usual wisdom and steadiness suddenly disappeared without a trace. "This emperor has talked for so long. Did you not listen to a single word I said? Ah! Isn't it just a matter of succession to the throne? When the two brats come out of Weiwei's stomach, you can pick one of them to be the emperor." Obviously, apart from Hellion Vivian, Beligaju was only gracious on the surface and did not have the patience for long. On the other hand, Eunuch Sun, who was blocking the retired emperor, was stunned for a moment. "Your Highness, are you talking about two brats? Wang Fei is pregnant with twins." In an instant, the retired emperor didn't even care about his anger. A smile appeared on his face. "Twins? Ha 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 ha, Weiwei is still the capable girl. Compared to an icy brat like you, Weiwei is many times better." Beligaju didn't refute this point. Of course, his wife was the best. But only one pair of tiger head shoes was made in the palace, and there are also those small clothes. Eunuch's son was originally a worrisome person. When he heard that one little prince had become two little princes, he immediately panicked. He didn't care if the retired Emperor Emeritus would pick up a teacup and smash the imperial palace in anger. He immediately ran outside and ordered, "You, all of you, go to Master Liang's place and say that we need to make an extra pair of tiger head shoes." "Ah, that's not right. Your Highness, is the other child a little prince or a little princess? If it's a princess, we need to make phoenix head shoes. Also, we need to make the small clothes more delicate." The retired Emperor Emeritus was also concerned about this problem. Compared to these troublesome brats, girls were more considerate. If he could have a precious great-granddaughter, his life would be complete. When the retired Emperor Emeritus thought of this, his heart was filled with joy. He said, "Since it's twins, the other child should be a little girl, right?" "I don't know." Beligaju's reply was very straightforward. That indifferent look of his made the retired emperor's anger rise again. "You stinking brat! Do you still act like a father? The child is about to be born, but you don't know anything." Beligaju allowed the people behind him to jump around and yawn lazily. When the retired Emperor Emeritus saw him like that, he wanted to smash the teacup again. However, there was still someone who didn't know how to read the situation. "Imperial grandfather, you don't have any goldfish in the pond. When you have time, ask Eunuch's son to make up for it. Otherwise, I won't have anything to eat." When the little one said this, his expression was very serious. His small face was very fierce as he made the request very domineeringly. The retired Emperor Emeritus took a deep breath. "That's the tiger-head fish that I got from the sanctuary, you foodie." The retired Emperor Emeritus's angry roar echoed throughout the entire palace. Hellion Vivian smiled gently and walked towards Beligaju. "Did you make Imperial Grandfather angry again?" "It's not me, it's little Seven." His Highness didn't blush at all when he said this. No matter how Eunuch's son stared at him from the side, he was very indifferent. How could Hellion Vivian not understand him? The smile on the corner of her mouth became bigger. Beligaju directly pulled her over and said in a very low voice, "Are you an idiot? It's so uncomfortable to walk. Why are you still going to the Hidden Spirit Temple? It's fine if you go, but you don't let me follow you. I'm going to fulfill a vow. It's not sincere to bring you along." Hellion Vivian said half-truthfully. She took his hand and put it on her lower abdomen. "You haven't said hello to the babies today." Beligaju sneered. "I greet them in my heart every day." This sentence doesn't sound like a good thing. The bigger fetus had just woken up and heard Beligaju's sentence. The smaller fetus had already fully developed at this time. He opened his eyes and looked at him. "Brother, we'll be out soon." The older fetus nodded and said, "I haven't been able to feel the outside world for the past few days, and I can't go out to hunt either. According to this situation, we shouldn't be too far away from the outside world. When the time comes, I can bring you around to play. You haven't seen the palace yet, it's very beautiful." "Yes, I'll be able to see brother's appearance then." The smaller fetus's voice was very light, but he also had the same wish. In the palace, Hellion Vivian looked sideways at the smiling man. She couldn't help but turn her head and kiss his face. She said as if she didn't care, "You have to learn to take care of the babies. If I'm not in the palace in the future, you won't be flustered." Chapter 858. Where are you going if you're not in the palace? Beligaju's voice was very indifferent. Hellion Vivian paused for a moment and smiled naturally. "For example, I'm going to train soldiers or burn incense. I can't go with the baby, can I?" Only then did Bailey Jiaju's eyes regain their warmth. He tilted her head toward him and planted a kiss on her black hair. His eyes were filled with a unique gentleness as he said, "There are so many people in the palace. It's impossible that no one is watching over these two brats. I don't want the wet nurse to take care of them. I want to take care of them myself." Helene Vivian continued with a chuckle and her hand also squeezed his. Beligaju had never been able to do anything to her, so naturally, he agreed to whatever she said. Therefore, the two of them sat on the small couch and read the parenting books. His Highness sneered as he read, "Little ghosts are troublesome creatures. Didn't you also grow up as a little ghost?" Helene Vivian found it funny. "They are very young and need adults to look after them." Bailey Jiaju followed her hand and placed his gaze on her round belly. "Trust me, these two brats of yours don't need anyone to look after them. They can still live well." Helene Vivian was relieved about this. There was probably no one in the world who was more domineering than her baby. Before he was born, he had almost eaten all the dead souls within a few hundred miles. Last time, she saw a few ghosts floating back and forth outside the palace. She was still wondering why these dead souls were so bold to wander here. She heard His Highness say that his baby caught them to play with. Treating ghosts as toys to play with, Helene Vivian always felt that her baby had been raised astray unknowingly. However, to Helene Vivian's relief, Beligaju's attitude towards the baby was changing every day. Perhaps even he himself didn't know that his expression became gentler and gentler as he rubbed her belly for digestion. Of course, he would still be very impatient, as if he was born to be at odds with the baby. Every time her stomach moved, a certain someone would sneer at the side. However, Helene Vivian felt that this was good. This unique way of communicating between father and son was really good. The palace was bustling with noise and excitement as usual. However, Beligaju was smart. He spun the teacup in his hand and his gaze was indifferent. "Where else did your young miss go besides the Hidden Spirit Temple today?" Logically speaking, the hidden god mercenaries should only listen to the orders of the family head. However, this man was too powerful, so powerful that he had nowhere to hide. "You don't want to tell me?" Beligaju chuckled and walked towards the mercenary. "I've told you before that the hidden army is here because of my permission. If I'm in a bad mood, do you think you can still fly around the palace like this?" The mercenary naturally knew what this person was capable of. He thought for a while and said, "Your Highness, young Miss has been at the Hidden Spirit Temple all this time. However, young Miss did look for someone some time ago. We sent people but there was no news of that person, so young Miss took back the order." "Who?" Beligaju spun the black jade ring on his finger. The mercenary could clearly feel the coldness emanating from him. The hidden god mercenaries don't know the details. Young Miss only said that the person's surname was Pei. She didn't mention his age and appearance, nor did she say why she was looking for him. "Pei." Beligaju's fingers paused and he didn't continue to ask. His eyes were as deep as the night outside. "She's about to wake up. Don't tell her that I looked for you." The mercenary lowered his eyes. "Yes." Beligaju retracted his gaze, put on his black cloak and walked back to the bedroom. The person on the bed was still sleeping. Her waist-length black hair was spread out on the soft quilt. She was always very well behaved when she was asleep. Probably sensing Bailey Jiaju's breath, Helene Wei Wei moved a little. She was still a little sleepy and her eyes were still closed. Her voice was drowsy as she asked, "Where did you go? Did a minister look for you?" "No, just a small matter." Beligaju immediately reached out and hugged her. His palm patted her back gently. "Good girl, go back to sleep." His voice was very deep. He had been coaxing people to sleep like this for a long time. He was already experienced in doing so. After a while, Helene Vivian really fell asleep. Bailey Jiaju looked at the quiet and fair little face that was nestled in his arms. His slender fingers tucked her black hair behind her ears, and his eyes slowly sank. Hellion Vivian, what are you hiding from me? The next day, the temperature warmed up. Winter was over and there was life everywhere. The two of them sat together in the south study. His Highness seemed to be in the mood to teach her how to write with a brush. However, Hellion Vivian was not a person who cultivated her mind. When she was a phoenix, she couldn't study scriptures. Now, she had to sit in the study for 2 hours. She was really uncomfortable. However, Beligaju didn't really want to teach her how to write. He just wanted her to obediently stay in his arms in the name of practicing calligraphy. So Hellion Vivian basically asked to eat something for every word she wrote. Beligaju also listened to her. He didn't even let her hold the chopsticks. He let her sit there and write properly. He was in charge of feeding her. The way the two of them got along had always been very natural. But their movements were not easy, but there was an indescribable intimacy everywhere. This made the people who came and went couldn't help but feel envious. The palace maids and eunuchs had never seen a couple like Beligaju and Hellion Vivian in the palace. In the beginning, they all thought that Hellion Vivian would be a person who would not be easy to get along with. After all, the princess consort's reputation was too well known. Moreover, when she killed people, she was really comparable to the royal family. But when they really got to know her, they found that having such a master in the palace was probably the best thing to happen to them. The princess consort's style of being in power had never changed. She would not mix well with the servants. But she never made things difficult for them. Sometimes she was a little silly. That's right, she was a little silly. There were some things that should be done by His Highness, but the princess consort did them all. For example, the princess consort liked to send flowers to His Highness. Last time, there was an official who came. His intention was nothing more than to let his daughter enter the palace. To put it nicely, it was to be a palace maid. In fact, everyone knew what he was thinking. That official was smart. He didn't look for His Highness, but directly went to the princess consort. At that time, the princess consort looked at him, smiled, and only said one sentence. She said, "Officially, don't you know that this person, Beligaju, has been contracted by me, Hellion Vivian?" As women, at that moment, the palace maids really felt that the princess consort was very handsome. It was the kind of handsomeness that seeped into her bones. Chapter 859. Many people couldn't be like the princess consort, who said, "I'll take care of it." However, the princess consort was free and easy to the extreme. The palace servants outside the south study room looked at the two people sitting together. One was holding the other from behind, holding a brush in their hands. Their side faces looked particularly beautiful under the sunlight. In the end, Hellion Wei Wei could not sit still. She lazily used her left hand to support her chin, writing very carelessly. Beligaju knocked on her head with his finger. "Your handwriting is like a dog lying on its stomach. How did you read the Buddhist scriptures in the first place? Do the people of Buddhism write like this? Have you seen me reading scriptures?" Hellion Vivian snorted and said, "When I was sleeping, I felt the sun was too bright, so I took a book to cover my face." "You definitely haven't seen me in Buddhism." Beligaju didn't say anything. He just smiled and squeezed her hand again. In fact, how could he not have seen it? In the whole of Buddhism, only she dared to do that. Every time he went there, she would hold a scripture book there to block him. She probably thought that no one would notice in that position. That was why the prideful phoenix was just a little thing that was lazy to interact with others. It was from then on that he had been thinking that such a little thing shouldn't be left in Buddhism. It should be raised in a place where he could see her all the time. It would be perfect for him to feed her. In fact, it was exactly as he thought. The phoenix in his arms was most suitable for him to raise. Beligaju laughed in a low voice. Helene Vivian didn't know what he was laughing at. She frowned in confusion. Beligaju grabbed her and hugged her again. He ordered, "Continue writing. Didn't you always say that you want to cultivate good prenatal education? How can my child's handwriting be as ugly as yours?" "Hey, if you're talking about prenatal education, then prenatal education. You don't have to attack me personally all the time," Helene Vivian protested amusedly. Beligaju gently curved thin lips. "I am using a typical example to educate them. Let people remember how ugly your handwriting is, and they will know how to work hard after they are born." Helene Vivian, what he said made so much sense that she was actually speechless. Helene Vivian also knew that His Highness was taking pleasure in teasing her, so she didn't care at all. She turned her head, sat up straight, and continued to write. As she wrote, she directed Beligaju to feed her. The days in the South Study were like this almost every day. Beligaju still liked to control power. But now, when he was dealing with the booklets, he would hold the booklets in one hand and feed Helene Vivian with the other. Otherwise, he would hold her hand and make her do exercises. In that case, it would be easier to give birth. Soon, it was the 3rd month, and everywhere in the imperial palace was beginning to feel spring. On this day, Helene Vivian was sitting beside Beligaju, studying her new martial arts. She was thinking about how to combine gunpowder and cold weapons when her stomach suddenly hurt. Dozens of heavenly thunders rolled through the clouds. In addition to the blazing fire, there was also a faint Buddhist light that seeped out. This scene, which should have appeared in Mountain Tenya, was now shining in the human world. Every commoner in the capital walked out of their houses and looked up at the sky that was destined to be unstable. Inside and outside the imperial palace, there was an unprecedented panic. Basins of hot water were continuously brought in by palace maids, and all the imperial physicians stood outside the bedroom, anxiously walking back and forth. Even the master of the hidden spirit temple was brought into the capital. The Buddhist light in the room shone brightly. When the midwife saw this scene, she couldn't help but chant Amitabha. To be honest, they were already stunned, but the 3rd prince was sitting by the bed, and that kind of murderous aura made them dare not waste any time. They just thought that the princess's pregnancy was really unusual. There was so much Buddhist light that they had never seen in a temple. The midwives suppressed the shock in their hearts, and their fingers trembled as they prepared cotton cloth and scissors, which would be useful in a while. When they were almost ready, the palace maid urged in a low voice, "Your Highness, it's time to go out." Beligaju turned his head and only gave her one word, "Get out." That voice was very cold, without a trace of warmth. The palace maid was so scared that she didn't dare to speak again. The midwives didn't know how to persuade the 3rd prince. Normally, when the princess in the imperial palace was about to give birth, the 3rd prince would not stay, for fear that the dirty blood would ruin the dignity of the imperial family. But it was obvious that no one could make the 3rd prince leave at this time. The midwives braced themselves to do it, but at this time, Helene Vivian opened her mouth. Her eyes looked at Beligaju, and there was a smile in her weak voice. "Go out and wait, okay? I don't want you to see me in such a sorry state." Beligaju took a deep look at her. Then, he reached out and brushed away the black hair that was sticking to her face. He kissed her gently on the lips. It was just a touch, but it was enough to show how much restraint he had. Okay. In the end, he still followed her wishes. But his orders were always so cold-blooded that it made people tremble. "Take good care of the princess. If anything happens to her, this prince will have all of you buried with her." The midwives trembled as they bowed their heads and said yes. They were even more careful when they treated Helene Vivian. Helene Vivian didn't feel any discomfort. She bit a piece of white cloth in her mouth, and the clothes she wore were loose. Someone cut her dress, and there was a sound everywhere. Princess Consort, use more strength. Yes, that's it. The voices of the midwives rang out one after another in her ears. Helene Vivian adjusted her breathing and strength according to the medical knowledge she had learned in the modern world. Her fingers gripped the bedsheet, and each time, she used more strength than the last. Finally, she heard the midwives say, "The head is coming out, the head is coming out. The body is coming out soon." Hearing this, Helene Vivian bit her thin lips and used more strength. Soft black feathers fell one by one, and in the fog, a baby with scarlet eyes fell to the ground. But at that time, he didn't open his eyes. Just by looking at that pink little face, everyone would think that he was a little angel sent by the heavens. "Princess, it's a prince, a little prince." The joy in the midwives' voices seemed to be contagious. When Helene Vivian turned her head, she also laughed softly. The baby was very obedient. He was sucking on his thumb in his mouth, unlike other babies who cried when they were born. Instead, he was laughing in an unbridled manner. It was as if he was mocking the gods and Buddhas. Chapter 860. Because of the birth of the prince, the palace was filled with jubilation. The midwife was laughing inside, and the palace maids who heard the report outside laughed even more. However, no one knew that Helene Vivian's soul seemed to be guided by something and was being forcefully stripped away. Even she did not realize it. Helene Vivian only felt her eyes tighten, and she was in a daze. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a doctor in a white coat with a mask on his face. Helene Weiwei's mind was in a mess. She shook her head, and her line of sight moved downwards. Someone was holding a scalpel, and there was a pulsator that kept beating. Everything was very familiar. It was so familiar that Helene Vivian subconsciously wanted to stand up. This was not the palace, nor was it the War Dragon dynasty. This was the 21st century. How could this be? Why was she here? Helene Vivian's eyes were in a mess, but her arm was pressed down, and then there was a hurried voice, "The patient is out of the coma. Her pulse and heartbeat are normal, but her emotions are fluctuating. Do we need to use a tranquilizer?" "No, it's not good for the child." "Wait a minute, the patient seems to have quietened down." Helene Vivian had indeed quietened down. When she heard that it was not good for the child, she retracted her left hand that was about to knock the doctor out. Although her body was very weak, her movements were very fast. Lying on the operating table, Helene Vivian looked at the faintly discernible light in her eyes. She did not have time to think about why she had returned to the modern world. The thought of giving birth to the baby safely occupied her mind. She did not understand why a baby would follow her to the modern world. There was no way to explain it with common sense. Originally, in Buddhism, she had seen the death of the phoenix in the hellfire light of Buddha. However, what she did not know was that the death meant that she would return to the modern world. In other words, once the baby was born, her relationship with that world would be cut off. She was supposed to die. Just like what the little king of hell said, what Bodhi did was enough to break this destiny. Was that why she brought another baby back to the modern world? But what about Baligaju? Helene Vivian didn't dare to think about it for a while. She was afraid that if she thought about it, the man would notice something. It was not that there was no way to immortality. As long as she returned to Buddhism and became the phoenix again, she would be able to continue living. However, if that was really the case, not only would she fulfill the Venerable One's destiny, she would also have to give up on the two babies. How could she bear to? She couldn't bear to part with anyone. But at this point, her heart still ached. Her heart ached for whether that person would take good care of herself. She was worried that he would go crazy when he realized that she was gone. At this moment, Hellion Vivian was actually not thinking about how many people the other party would kill or how many things would be destroyed. Instead, it was how to make that man feel a little better. She had promised many people many things, and she always kept her word. It was only to him that she had once said that no matter what happened, she would always be by his side and accompany him. But she still broke her promise. Hellion Vivian reached out to cover her red eyes. She was strong and didn't cry to the point of breaking down. Because the only thing she could do now was to let the babies be born safely. With Hellion Vivian's cooperation, the rest of the work went smoothly. Wah! A clear cry resounded throughout the entire hospital. The child was born with auspicious light. Even in modern times, such auspicious light could no longer be seen by the naked eye. However, as soon as he was born, the yin qi in the hospital morgue was reduced by more than half. This was a situation that had never happened before. It was not noticed by ordinary people, but none of the dead souls within hundreds of miles dared to approach the operating room. Even the reapers who came to the hospital to catch the dead souls to Hades also stopped in that instant. They couldn't help but look at the end of the corridor. What's that? Why is the spirit in the body so strong? Shall we go and take a look? The two reapers looked at each other and planned to walk in that direction. However, before they could move, their path was blocked by their leader. The leader carried a scythe on his shoulder and wore a well-ironed suit. His slender fingers pushed up the frame of his glasses as he said in a calm voice, "Hades only cares about the dead, not the living. Go back." Yes. The reapers didn't dare to say anything. However, when they returned to Hades, there were still people who asked, "Hey, what happened up there?" The ghosts on our side reacted. Mengpig didn't even drink the soup and just stared blankly at the top of their heads. What was born? Why can we feel the light of Buddha even in the 18th level of hell? You're asking me, how would I know? The Reapers said in a low voice, in short, it's an incredible fellow. The same situation was happening in the palace. However, compared to the tranquility of modern times, this place seemed to be more destructive. From the moment the child smiled, a long Sanskrit chant seemed to resound in the air. 3,000 feet under the yellow springs, countless demons seemed to have been summoned, and waves of water splashed out. The fiendish demons hidden in the clouds revealed their heads excitedly, as if they were celebrating the birth of their little master. However, the celebration in the dark was always different from the celebration in the human world. The demons were about to arrive, and all of them followed behind Beligaju as if they were cheering for this day. A thick black fog engulfed the entire palace. Beligaju didn't hesitate at all. When he heard that the mother and child were safe, he strode into the bedroom. His eyes were fixed on the person lying on the bed, and he didn't even look at the little prince that the midwife carried over. Without looking, Beligaju knew that it was 100% a demon. He was too familiar with the atmosphere here, so familiar that even if he closed his eyes, he could still smell the thick scent of blood. After his hand touched Hellion Vivian's cheek, he pursed his thin lips and gradually let go. Fortunately, her body was warm. However, when Beligaju leaned over to kiss her lips, his smile suddenly froze on his face. In front of his eyes, Hellion Vivian's face was still very beautiful, and even the signs of her body didn't show any signs of deterioration, but her shell was empty. Bailey Jiaju's expression was distorted in an instant. Following that, it was uncontrollable panic and killing intent that no one could control. How could this be? Beligaju didn't believe it, and used the demon contract to search for Hellion Vivian again. He still couldn't sense it. He couldn't sense anything. She wasn't here. Beligaju's eyes fiercely narrowed for a moment. A loud bang was heard. The bed under his hand was almost instantly shattered into pieces. Before the midwives could recover, Beligaju grabbed the child's arm, and his eyes were cold, as if he was looking for something on the child's body. However, there was still nothing. Chapter 861. Beligaju clenched his hands. No one noticed that in many corners of the imperial palace, because of this action, black fog faintly appeared. The black fog seemed to be extremely scared, trying its best to shrink into a ball. They had never seen a man so angry before. They pressed down on the pain in their chests, not daring to make a sound. They could only look at Beligaju, fearing from the bottom of their hearts what he would do. As Beligaju's mounts, the Fire Qilin and the Azure Dragon naturally felt an unprecedented sense of destruction. They couldn't help but reveal their true forms, soaring above the imperial palace. The Fire Qilin only glanced into the room, vaguely guessing what had happened. Its expression suddenly changed. It had once thought that if its little master was born, then Hellion Vivian's connection with this world would most likely be broken. But thinking was one thing, when this matter truly happened, the Fire Qilin realized that it was actually so uneasy. In the black fog, Beligaju just stood there, no matter how the people around him screamed. It was as if he didn't hear them at all, his fingers were bleeding from his pinch. He had never tortured himself like this before. The midwives didn't know what had happened, but they felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. Finally, Beligaju moved. He reached out his blood-stained hand, covering his face. A suppressed and twisted low laugh sounded from his throat. This king said before, no one can take her away from this king. That kind of laughter was too hoarse, as his voice fell to the ground. The marble under his feet cracked, creating cracks one after another. A power that no one could resist was emitted from his body. The entire imperial palace collapsed under that kind of tremor. The midwives were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the midst of the dust, Bailey Jiaju, who was dressed in a pure black robe, strolled out from inside. He held Hellion Wei Wei's body in his arms. His eyes were not at all like what they had seen before. Instead, they were filled with the color of blood, like a red gem, dripping with blood, incomparably beautiful. Large clumps of black feathers fell from the sky. While everyone was in shock, all they could see was the black shadow of the demon behind the man. Those black shadows seemed to have been influenced by their master. With a ruthlessness that seemed to be able to tear everything apart, they swept through the entire palace. He had never seen or felt such a crazy surge of power before. No one dared to act rashly. At this time, Beligaju had clearly lost his mind. No, especially when he had lost his mind. Or rather, he was more like himself than ever. Because without Hellion Wei Wei, he no longer needed to think about the only thing that concerned him as a human being. Many people said that Beligaju was very ruthless. In fact, it was because of Hellion Vivian that he had the patience to do something to hide the evil bloodthirsty aura on his body. Now that Hellion Vivian was no longer around, he couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. As for how terrifying a Beligaju without disguise was, everyone who had experienced the great battle between the gods and Buddhists knew. For a moment, everyone was in a panic. The master of the hidden spirit temple stood in the middle of the river of blood. He only chanted, Amitabha. He knew clearly in his heart that if no one stopped Bailey Jiaju, he could destroy the entire capital. Your Highness. Eunuch's son said worriedly. Apart from fear, there was also sadness on his old face. You will hurt the little Highness like this. Beligaju didn't stop. When he lowered his head, he found that the little ghost was still hugging his leg. He directly kicked him away and continued to walk forward. When Eunuch's son saw this, he was almost scared out of his wits. How could a newborn baby take such a kick? He hurriedly wanted to walk over, but found that not only was the little highness fine, but he was also hugging the royal family's leg after being kicked away for a while. Eunuch's son was stunned. He had never seen a child so resistant to beatings. On the other hand, he was so shocked by the aura that he couldn't stand up at all. Beligaju didn't care about the little burden at his feet. There was only one thought in his mind now, and that was to go to the Hades. Once a person's soul disappeared, it could only be with the King of Hell. Suppressing the anger that was about to explode, Beligaju punched his foot. The earth shook even more. In the most stable palace, the hottest volcano had appeared. The demon tide rose, and countless black crows flew up. The ancient beasts galloped over, almost breaking the ground. Such a huge anomaly appeared in the originally prosperous capital. This made the exorcists feel the most uneasy. Within the 6 paths, all the gods and Buddhas knew that the mountain was not an ordinary mountain, but Mount Bujo in hell. Green Dragon and Fire Qilin looked at each other. Without hesitation, they flew over in an instant and followed behind the man. Every one of them had a premonition in their hearts. This time, their king had really returned. Not only was it because of his strength, but also because of his inhuman nature. Except for Hellion Vivian, everyone else was probably meaningless in the eyes of the king. The legendary Hades appeared in the world just like that. Originally, there was a very clear boundary between the human world and the Hades. That was darkness and day. People in the dark could see what people in the day were doing and saying. People in the day couldn't see the darkness. In fact, some people had never believed in reincarnation and ghosts. But when they saw the reflection in front of them, the whole capital was in chaos. Those scenes that could only be seen in books appeared in front of their eyes so realistically. Some of the ghosts were being whipped by the ghost envoys and were being grinded. Some were thrown into a pot of oil and fried beyond recognition. However, that was the result of all their suffering. That was why they kept jumping into the pot again and again. These scenes didn't appear for long, because soon, the King of Hell, who was in charge of the underworld, found something suspicious. He waved his long sleeves, and his handsome face was full of wild power. "What's going on?" Reporting to my lord, someone opened the door of the underworld with one punch. The judge stammered. The King of Hell kicked him away, and was very angry. "Of course I know that the door of the underworld has been opened by someone. I'm asking who that person is." Everything in the underworld was seen by the human world. Although it was only a short time of 10 seconds for him, the King of Hell, it was a blatant provocation. Yes. The judge didn't finish speaking. There was a bang. The wooden door of the 18th floor of hell was kicked into pieces. As the wood chips flew, Beligaju walked towards the King of Hell and only said 2 words coldly, "It's me." Chapter 862. When the love rivals met, their eyes would turn red. Although this love rival was decided unilaterally by the King of Hell, as long as the King of Hell saw the face that was nobler than his own, he would want to beat the other party up. Emperor of the Heavenly Axiom. The King of Hell laughed evilly. His bloodthirsty look was on par with his son's. Beligaju did not beat around the bush. His black robe fluttered, and his figure was as quick as a shadow. He directly swept towards the King of Hell and reached out to pinch the King of Hell's neck. "Where is she?" "She? Who?" The King of Hell was very baffled, and his anger grew. "Don't think that just because my wife likes you, I won't dare to do anything to your face. If it wasn't because I hurt you so that you could use the trick of injuring yourself to gain my wife's trust, I would have done it long ago." When Beligaju was still the emperor, many fairy-like women used his actions to ask for their other halves. The King of Hell had hated this person for a long time. What cold as before, noble and luxurious. To put it bluntly, he was the same as him. They both killed without batting an eyelid. However, the other party was better at disguising himself. Wasn't it to better get close to the Phoenix of Buddhism? Wait a minute, could it be that he came here to look for Phoenix? The King of Hell suddenly felt a little gloating. A wild smile hung at the corner of his mouth. What's wrong? Your wife also ran away. Good job of running away. Bang! As soon as the King of Hell finished speaking, Beligaju's fist landed. With the wind from the punch, it hit the King of Hell's face. If it was someone else, they would definitely not be able to withstand this punch. However, the King of Hell was not someone else. He turned his head and spat out the blood in his mouth. Then, he grabbed Beligaju's wrist and returned the punch with his other fist, not to be outdone. When the two of them fought, it was like two stars colliding. Every time they moved, the Hades would vibrate. The judge held his head in his hands, trembling as he stood at the side. He watched as countless undead were reduced to nothingness in the battle between the two of them. Even the decorations in the Hades were shattered into pieces. As he fought, King of Hell felt that something was definitely wrong. He wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth with his finger and said, "Motherfucker, are you doing this on purpose? You specifically chose to fight in my territory. You're just afraid of ruining it, right? If you have the ability to go to the heavenly Tao, I will also shatter your divine palace for you." The King of Hell's words meant that he wanted to stop the war. After all, he was always the one who started the fight. Beligaju would only fight with him if he was impatient. But this time, it was obviously different. Beligaju did not even listen to him. He raised his leg and kicked the King of Hell into the wall at the side. Then, he looked at him condescendingly and said in an extremely cold voice, "I'll ask you one last time, where is she?" "Ha!" The King of Hell laughed softly. He did not care about the blood on his body. He looked up at Beligaju and said, "Do you not understand, or are you deceiving yourself? Even if Phoenix's soul is gone, it is impossible for her to come to the Hades. She is the only Phoenix in the world." Beligaju clenched his fingers one by one. His chest hurt, but the color of his eyes became redder and redder, as if they were filled with blood. The judge was afraid that something would really happen to the Hades. He squatted down in fear. As he untied the rope on his little King of Hell, he lowered his voice and said, "Little Highness, you should go outside and take a look. That emperor has fought his way into the underworld. He and the King of Hell are fighting right now. If they continue fighting, all the ghosts will run out of the underworld. When that happens, it will be terrible." When the little King of Hell heard that Beligaju had come, he put down his crossed legs and rushed out with his black axe. He originally thought that the other party was just looking for him to talk about old times, but when he saw those red eyes that were as red as blood, only then did the little King of Hell realize that something must have happened, because this man looked like he was about to go crazy. And his old man didn't like him. The little King of Hell didn't know what his old man said to Beligaju. He saw that the man's originally fast movements suddenly stop. He stood there with his slender body, and the shadow under his feet was very long. He looked like he had lost his soul. He covered his face with one hand, and didn't care that his hand was dripping with blood. Looking at him from afar, he actually made people feel a sense of loneliness. That's right, it was lonely. Even though there were countless demons hovering above him, even though he could control the fate of the world, the little King of Hell still thought of this word. It was as if the man had been punched in the heart. The evil aura bloomed under his feet, and even the black stones of hell were crushed by him. Black wings that symbolized evil even formed behind his back. That kind of evil energy was simply unstoppable. I've already said that this is a lunatic. The little King of Hell growled as he raised his black axe and blocked in front of Beligaju. His entire body was burning with the fire of purgatory. Beligaju turned his eyes and looked at him. His eyes were as red as blood. Get lost. Even if you kill everyone here, you won't change anything. The little king of hell gritted his teeth. His gaze landed on the baby crawling by his feet. Wait a minute, what's that? You're fighting with a child. Beligaju chuckled and moved his fingers away from his face. His handsome face had never shown any evil. He didn't answer the little king of hell's question. Instead, he laughed in a gloomy voice. Since she's not here, I'll destroy Hades and go to Buddhism to find her. If Buddhism still doesn't have her, I'll destroy this world. He's serious. That was the first thought that flashed through the little king of hell's mind. His second thought was, fucking hell. If the world was destroyed, how would he be able to chase after his little hook? Although they weren't from the same era, how could there be a future without a past life? Calm down, the little king of hell decided to appeal to his emotions. Can you carry the child under your feet first? He's next to the fire of hell. If he falls, he'll be burned to death. Speaking of this, the little king of hell seemed to have thought of something. No, why would this child come to our Hades? The judge was afraid of death and didn't dare to stand. He could only lie on the ground and whisper into the little king of hell's ear, Your Highness, I think that's the emperor's son. Look at his eyes. Only then did the little king of hell realize that the crawling baby's eyes were red. He even had a bloodthirsty smile on his face, as if he was playing a game. He didn't seem afraid of falling into the fire at all. With his aptitude, even if he fell into the sea of hellfire, he would treat it as a hot spring bath. Thinking of this, the little king of hell narrowed his eyes and said to the figure that was destroying the world, Do you want to destroy your child with the phoenix as well? Chapter 863. Beligaju's figure paused for a moment. It was just that the pause was very short, so short that it was almost unnoticeable. He's a devil, and a devil won't die. Beligaju's smile was bloodthirsty, and the evilness almost seeped into his bones. Only then did the little king of hell truly realize that there was no way to stop this man. Without the phoenix, he had returned to being the great devil who was once known for his murderous ways. Tian Dao and Buddhism would once again face a crisis that was not inferior to diabolism. What he was afraid of was that the Beligaju this time would be more destructive than the previous one. At that time, he simply liked power, and there was always room for leeway in his careless heart. Anyway, it was fine as long as he could defeat people. Now, he was still elegant, but under that elegance was an unrestrained killing intent. If he really destroyed the underworld, the six Tao would be in chaos. No. He had to stop this man. The little king of hell's figure flashed and quickly blocked in front of Beligaju. His voice was loud and clear, Phoenix once came to the underworld to look for me. In an instant, the boiling sea of fire in the underworld fell back again. Beligaju picked up the little king of hell. His voice was very low, so low that it was even a little hoarse. What do you know? The torment of losing Hellion Vivian made him want to go berserk almost every moment. However, Beligaju forced himself to endure. Because he was not sure if he could find any hope here. The little king of hell looked at him. Phoenix should have known something in advance, so she came to the underworld to look for me. She wanted to see her fate. I also told her that there is no record of her life and death in the underworld, not only hers, but also yours, the Emperor. You were born in chaos, and no one can control you except the six Tao. She is the only variable in Buddhism, so there is no record of her in the Book of Life and Death. There is only one book that can record her, Tianji. Without waiting for the little king of hell to finish, Beligaju said with a dark expression, Legend has it that only the owner can open it. The little king of hell nodded. Rather than calling it a book, it would be better to call it a huge calculation. When it is running, there will be countless numbers of calculations and speculations. The one who can really see something from it is Phoenix. But just like what the world says, the owner of the heavenly mystery will only appear when he wants to. You mean to make me wait? Beligaju's voice carried the calm before the storm. The little king of hell wasn't afraid of him. Because only by finding Tingy's owner can we know if Phoenix has really disappeared. I know that you've never waited for anything before. But this time, you can either wait, or you can destroy the entire world and still not change the outcome. He knew that this sentence would definitely convince the other party. This was because he knew that in this man's heart, Phoenix was more important than anything else. This included even his innate pride. As expected, Beligaju slowly released his grip on the little king of hell's neck. The churning aura behind him also gradually calmed down. Those dead souls, who had almost been burned into ashes, were finally saved. They lay on the ground, gasping for air. The tremors in hell returned to normal. The infernal judge who was hiding under the table also crawled out with a brush in his hand. The king of hell was the most annoyed. He had just gathered his strength and wanted to fight Beligaju, but he didn't expect the other party to suddenly stop. He didn't even look at the king of hell as he walked over. His left leg was being held tightly by a child. The king of hell looked at the child for a while and suddenly laughed. He decided not to find trouble with Beligaju. As long as his son was around, it would be a huge trouble. Outside hell, Azure Dragon and Fire Cheeland originally thought that this place would be shaken to dust. They were prepared for their master to go completely berserk. They didn't expect their master to walk out of the darkness alone. He seemed to have regained his calmness, but his eyes were red as if he would start a massacre at any time. Go find the one with the surname Pei. Whether he's in Tian Dao or Buddhism, find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground. Hearing this order, Fire Cheelan and Azure Dragon looked at each other and bowed their heads in response, yes. They couldn't figure out what His Highness was thinking now. Had he really regained his calmness? Fire Cheelan and Azure Dragon looked at the tall figure walking in front of them. It was unknown when it started to snow, but the fog lingered in the air. Even when people spoke, they could exhale. Logically speaking, it shouldn't snow in this season. However, because of Beligaju, the snow was getting heavier. Beligaju's face didn't show anything. He walked in front of them like a walking corpse. His left leg was hugged by a little demon with a short and thick arm. The little demon was not afraid of the cold at all, nor was he afraid of Beligaju's hostility. He directly used his father's leg as a teething club and gnawed there with an evil smile. The snow fell like goose feathers on the tree branches, on the roof beams, and on the long wooden chair. It seemed that this winter would never pass. The lonely figure like snow was like a painting splashed with ink. The black and white were distinct as he stood in the middle of the palace. His long hair fluttered, and his handsome face was cold. At this moment, nothing could be felt from this man. Pride, elegance, contempt, mockery, weakness, and cruelty. He just stood there. His long and thick eyelashes were stained with snow. The marble under his feet shattered inch by inch, staining the blood flowing from his fingertips. At that moment, Azure Dragon and Fire Cheelan understood that their master didn't recover his calm. Instead, he hid his ruthlessness even deeper, so deep that it made people feel uneasy. However, they didn't know that Beligaju was only thinking about that person. He never thought that the phoenix he raised would leave. Because he didn't think about it, when he lost her, it hurt so much. It wasn't a very intense feeling. It was just that his throat hurt, his eyes hurt, and his chest felt like it was completely hollowed out. Fire Cheelan didn't dare to look at his master. He knew that he had to find the one surnamed Pei. If there was no news of the one surnamed Pei, his master would definitely destroy the entire world when he exploded again. However, Fire Qilin was afraid that when they really found the one surnamed Pei, he would tell them that the princess was no longer around. At that time, his master's reaction would be even stronger than now. Fire Qilin didn't dare to think about that ending. The only thing he could do was think of a way to find the person as soon as possible. Chapter 864. It was nighttime. 21st century, Huaxia Imperial Capital. The endless stream of cars ran through the city without stopping. Standing in front of the French window on the 31st floor, one could almost see the entire city at night. A group of men were sitting there playing poker. All of them had good looks and wore black t-shirts. Even though they were sitting there with no interest in life, one could tell that this group of people was different from ordinary people. The room was connected from top to bottom, like a duplex. The whole room was bright and the decoration was sturdy. The smell of freshly boiled coffee filled the room, giving it a special feeling. If boss doesn't come back soon, this life will be boring. A man in a pure white suit leaned against the second floor and drank a mouthful of wine. He looked down at his friends who were playing poker. Isn't it boring to play poker all day? One of the baldies threw the old K in his hand onto the coffee table and curled his lips at the person beside him with a cigar in his mouth. It's better than L fiddling with his guns all day, wiping them 10 times a day. He's almost married to his weapons. The man in the suit sighed and put down the wine glass in his hand. He went downstairs and said, "Forget it, I'm going out to pick up girls. Call me when boss comes back. Boss said that if she doesn't give us any news for a month, we will wait here." The young man with the gun looked up coldly. "Do you want to be beaten up into a honeycomb again?" The man in the suit raised his hand. "Hey, L, don't be so serious. I'm just saying. Since boss said to wait, we have to wait. But we still have to eat, right?" The young man pursed his lips. He didn't think about this problem. The man in the suit smiled. "I knew you guys don't have common sense. But don't worry, I've ordered takeout. Judging by the time, the delivery guy should be here soon." Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. The young man put away the gun in his hand and covered it with his black leather jacket. Then, he signaled the man in the suit to open the door with his eyes. The man in the suit didn't care that he was the one being ordered. He held his wallet and was about to pay the delivery guy outside the door. However, he didn't expect that the person standing outside the door wasn't a delivery guy. Instead, it was boss. The youth behind him, who had always been calm, suddenly stood up. The rest of the men who were playing poker also stopped playing. All of them widened their eyes and looked at Hellion Vivian, who appeared in front of them. The man in the suit stuttered, "Boss, why are you carrying a child? Where did this come from?" "I gave birth to him," Hellion Vivian said without turning her head. Her voice was very indifferent. "Close the door." The man in the suit didn't know how to react. "Boss, what did you just say? You gave birth to her. Since when can you get pregnant?" I'm in a bad mood." Hellion Vivian held the baby in one hand and looked at him with a smile. "If you want to be beaten, continue to make noise." The man in the suit immediately shut his mouth. However, he was still curious. Why did boss go out and have a child? Calculating the time, it didn't seem possible. The young man also felt that it was inconceivable. He looked at Hellion Vivian seriously and asked, "Boss, is this child really yours? She didn't pick him up on the street?" "Yes." Hellion Vivian walked to the sofa and sat down. She gently patted the baby in her arms. Her body hadn't fully recovered. From the moment she opened her eyes, she tried her best to give birth to the child. If it weren't for the baby, she would have suspected that she had a very long dream after she fell into a coma. The dream was so beautiful that she didn't want to wake up. However, not only the baby, but also the power that suddenly awakened in her body told her that everything in the past was all real. Her soul traveled back in time to 1,000 years ago, and she found the memories that she should have had. Previously, she didn't understand why she saw her own death in the purgatory light of Buddha of Buddhism. Now she understood. According to the original destiny, she couldn't escape the heavenly punishment. Once the baby was born, she would be turned into ashes. However, because of what Bodhi did, she got back her phoenix dharma form. Therefore, she was still the phoenix, but she had to return to her own place. However, she wanted to go back. Back to the man who always knocked her head and called her an idiot. The man in the suit saw that Hellion Weiwei's expression was not right. He had never seen their boss show such an expression. It was as if she had lost something and couldn't get it back no matter how hard she tried. After all, the man in the suit was very experienced in the relationship between men and women. At first glance, he knew that their boss's current expression was definitely related to the child's father. However, he really couldn't imagine who could overpower their boss. One should know that when their boss picked up a gun, it was as if she was the queen herself. There were not many people who dared to make a move on her. Unless, young Master Tang. No, that's impossible. Young Master Tang never let any woman get close to him except for his little childhood sweetheart. Even their boss was the same. In other words, their boss's child was very likely to have an unknown father. Contrary to what the man in the suit had thought, the rest of the people were just like what he had said. They were all rough men and did not have such delicate observation skills. They just stared at the baby in Hellion Wei's arms uniformly with their eyes. Not only was the baby not shy, but his eyes were clear and he was born with a noble air. Looking at those people, their hearts were itching. Boss, let me hold the baby. I can coax him to sleep. Fuck off, you're so big. It's so uncomfortable for the baby to sleep in your arms. Also, you're so strong. What if you hurt the baby? I'll carry her. I'm the most suitable person to carry her. The men pushed each other with fierce looks on their faces, but when they arrived in front of the baby, they smiled tenderly. The man in the suit reached out and touched his forehead. Did these people really not notice that something was wrong with their boss? L. K. Jean S. Lao A. Hellion Vivian softly interrupted their noise. Her voice was very light but very serious. I've decided to stop and not accept any more missions. I'm here today to tell you this. I will live here in the future, but the ghost team will be disbanded. You can go wherever you want to go according to the rules of the underworld. My whereabouts and true identity are completely confidential. If someone finds this place in the future, I will never let him go back alive. When the young elf heard that the ghost team was disbanded, his eyes widened instantly, but he couldn't say a word. The man in the suit and Lao A looked at each other and whispered, Boss wants to protect the baby, so she wants to disband the ghost team. Chapter 865. Hellion Vivian looked up and said with a tired voice, It's not entirely because of the baby. I haven't been in a good condition recently. It's not suitable for me to accept missions. Young L looked at her and sat back in his seat. His voice was very soft. I'm not leaving. I'll stay. I'll stay too. If you don't want to accept missions, then so be it. Old A was big and his laughter was somewhat deafening. We can take advantage of this time to raise the baby. Boss, what's your next plan? Hellion Wei knew that these brothers of hers did not want her to be alone. Although they were a group of rough men, they could still give her warmth at times. I want to open a car repair shop. I'll lay low for 2 years until the baby can walk. The main reason was that she wanted to see if there was any way to go back. Okay, then we'll open a car repair shop. The man in the suit was excited and wanted to hold the baby in Helene Vivian's arms. However, as soon as he reached out his hand, he saw a black dog head faintly appear beside him. The dog head's eyes were blood red. It stared at him and was very creepy. The man in the suit immediately retracted his hand. When he looked carefully again, only the baby's noble and cute little face could be seen. It was as if what he saw just now was just an illusion. What was that just now? The man in the suit didn't believe in illusions. In their line of work, they were more sensitive than ordinary people. Helene Vivian didn't want to hide from her good brothers. She simply said to the person behind her, "Little Black, come out." In the next second, a black wind seemed to blow in the room. In the fog, a black magical dog slowly walked out of the air and stood behind Helene Vivian. Its eyes were scarlet. The man in the suit narrowed his eyes. At first glance, he knew that this wasn't an ordinary black dog. The others also looked at each other and didn't say anything. They just waited for Helene Vivian to speak. Whether you believe it or not, after being in a coma for a month, when I woke up, not only did I have a baby, but my eyes also had a problem. Helene Vivian glanced at the brothers standing in front of her. Now, I can see ghosts. Hearing that, everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. They were all in disbelief. One had to know that in their line of work, they were all materialists. Ghosts and gods did not exist in their eyes. However, after the shock, there was a strong sense of interest. Especially the man in the suit. Since that's the case, why don't we take advantage of the free time to take on some private jobs? After saying that, he winked at Helene Vivian. We can also earn some money for milk powder. Helene Wei smiled and agreed with what he said. S was in charge of the finances of the spirit organization. S was equivalent to the financial manager and business manager of the Phantom. In less than a day, he found a piece of land in the capital of Huaxia. The location of the land was very mysterious. There were antique shops on both sides of the road. At the end of the road was a kindergarten. And there was only one car repair shop. From that day onwards, the famous ghosts of both the black and white sides were disbanded. No one knew where they had gone. Some said that they had entered the National Defense Department, some said that they had gone to the Sahara, and some said that they had gone to Dubai to fish for gold. But in fact, only the young master of the Tang sect knew. This group of thugs didn't go anywhere. They concealed their identities on an inconspicuous street and lived the most ordinary life. Young master, don't we have to do anything? In front of the large floor-to-ceiling window, a young man wearing a black mask asked the man sitting in the office chair in a low voice. The man smiled, shook the goblet in his hand twice, and gently took a sip of the red liquid inside. He said in an evil tone, "No, let them be happy. When necessary, ghosts will wake up again." "Yes, young master." The young man paused and said, "This time, the ghosts should be asleep because of that child." The man raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth were full of playfulness. "Weiwei's child. Then give her more red packets. You'll send the money." The young man lowered his eyes and accepted the order without saying anything. Like a shadow, he carried a wooden box and shuttled through the night scene of the city. When he appeared again, he was already standing in front of the car repair shop. Helene Vivian also recognized him. She looked at the mask on his face and then at the wooden box on the ground. "Young Master Tang sent this." "Yes." The young man's appearance was too handsome, and his eyes were also very good-looking. "It doesn't make a difference even if you have a baby. I thought you would gain some weight. Other than young Master Tang's gift money, there's also my gift for you. It's all in the box." After saying that, the young man buckled the black hat on his head and disappeared into the night street on a skateboard under his feet. Helene Vivian had just opened the box when she was dazzled by the glittering gold inside. Then, she saw the additional gift that the young man had mentioned. It was a certificate of the baby's household registration in the capital. However, what made Helene Vivian's head hurt was, the surname on it was Helene. Our baby's surname is Bailey. Helene Vivian shook her head. Her eyes looked at the hazy sky and could vaguely hear the noise coming from the car repair shop. Old A, how many times have I told you not to let little boss take your gun? It will go off accidentally. Also, did you forget to change little boss's diaper again? My God. Oh. Put away your explosives. We're running a car repair shop now, not an arms dealer. Jean, if I see you secretly feeding little boss German stout again, I'll post the fact that you like men on Weibo. The man in the suit vaguely felt like he was going crazy. 6 rough men raising a little Prince Charming, plus Helene Vivian, this carefree mother, who knows what kind of person Bao Bao will be raised into. The only thing that can be confirmed is that Bao Bao is definitely not to be trifled with. However, compared to Bao Bao, the fact that Bao Bao is not to be trifled with is what really makes people unable to sleep, early in the morning, in the huge palace. Eunuch's son was panting and chasing a little boy in a yellow brocade robe all over the floor. Little Highness, wait for me, Little Highness. The little boy didn't do anything, but he was stepping on an evil spirit who originally planned to steal food in the palace. The evil smile on the corner of his mouth was very vicious. Except for Green Dragon and Fire Qilin who were following behind him, the rest of the eunuchs and palace maids didn't know what he was doing at all. They thought that their Little Highness was just exercising a little more. After all, compared to ordinary children, the Little Highness was unusually smart, which had already formed his personality. Compared to the royal family, the Little Highness's personality was cooler and harder to manipulate. He never let people hold him, or maybe it was his innate arrogance that made it seem like he was looking down on everyone. Especially those eyes, which were like red and translucent gems. At first glance, people would feel that they were ancient and mysterious, but at the same time, full of evil. Chapter 866. This was what Bailey Jiaju saw when he came out of the palace. The hostility on his body was getting more and more obvious. In contrast to the hostility, his expression was getting more and more indifferent, no matter who he was facing. Seeing him coming over, the big baby first looked up, then reached out his hand and held Beligaju's long legs in his arms. There was a big evil smile at the corner of his mouth. Eunuch's son knew that the Little Highness was going to pee when he saw his posture. He could not bear to look and covered his face. Beligaju naturally noticed the wetness on his feet. He reached out and lifted the child up, stripped the child's clothes, and let him hang upside down on his legs for others to admire. The big baby was still smiling, but at this moment, his handsome little face was completely black. The pair of eyes that looked at Beligaju was definitely not friendly. Beligaju sneered and let the baby's eyes meet his. Son, you better be good, don't provoke me. The big baby narrowed his eyes, his expression was very cold. It was obvious that he did not respect Beligaju. Beligaju's eyes were faintly hiding a murderous aura. He glanced at Green Dragon and Fire Qilin. Is there still no news of the one with the surname Pei? Not in Buddhism, not in Tian Dao. Qilin and I made a preliminary judgment that he is in the human world. Green Dragon lowered his eyes, his long hair brushing the ground. Beligaju suppressed the rage in his heart, his voice was cold. Find him or do something to make him come out. The one with the surname Pei shouldn't want to see too many people die in the human world. When Green Dragon and Fire Qilin heard Beligaju's words, they knew what he wanted to do. His Highness' idea of destroying the world had never changed. As time passed, this idea would become more and more ingrained. They had to speed up, otherwise, all the demons in the entire divine mainland would appear under his command and occupy the human world. Of course, this result was not bad for them. After all, they had been like this hundreds of years ago. However, both Green Dragon and Fire Chelan knew that the only way to make their master feel better was not to destroy anything, but to find the princess again. The Fire Chelan had been by Beligaju's side for the longest time, and this kind of situation had happened before. Back then, its master was still a child. But it was that child who tore apart dozens of demons with his bare hands after the princess consort disappeared. The people in the palace also died because of the pressure released by His Highness. At that time, His Highness' primordial spirit had yet to return to its original position. Even he himself could not withstand the power he released at that moment. Right now, His Highness was both a celestial being and a demon being. If he wanted to, he could even cause the six paths to go into chaos. Therefore, history could not be allowed to repeat itself. What the Fire Chelan didn't expect was that its master would explode so quickly. About 3 months later, his subordinates replied that they had seen traces of Pei in Dunhuang. They had indeed arrived at the boundless desert, but they couldn't find anyone. There was only an ancient city standing tall in the middle of the desert. The city was like an ancient Greek temple. It wasn't complete, but it was incomplete. There was no one inside, and the temperature was so high that it made people feel thirsty. Occasionally, 1 or 2 reptiles could be seen on the sand. The surroundings were like a golden desert. It was a barren land that stretched as far as the eye could see. When the wind blew, one could see the white bones inside. This place was not simple. This was the Fire Chelan's first reaction, but it didn't know where it was. Only Beligaju stood in the middle of the barren half of the desert city. Suddenly, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the side of his body. A slender and ice-cold black shadow immediately appeared. However, he was also very fast. He stood on his heels and hovered in the air, holding a black leather notebook in his hand. The man was very handsome. He looked cold as if he had just walked out of a coffin. His hair was very long and black like a waterfall. There was not a single strand of messy hair. He should have looked harmless, but there was no trace of human life in him. Death? Beligaju narrowed his eyes. The pressure was not to be ignored. Where is Pei? The death closed the notebook. His voice was very calm and normal. I'm looking for him too. When Bailey Jiaju heard that sentence, he knew that the one with the surname Pei was no longer here. Since that was the case, he could only force him out. Bailey Jiaju did not spread the news to look for the one with the surname Pei. Instead, he returned to the magical realm 3,000 feet below. He sat on the high and mighty dark throne with one hand supporting his chin. He looked at the group of demons gathered under his feet with a cold and bloodthirsty expression. He opened his thin lips slightly and uttered only one word, kill. For thousands of years, the demons that surrounded Mount Bujo followed an unknown order. Unless they were very hungry, they would never rush into the human world. Now, their king finally had no more scruples. Naturally, they didn't have to follow so many rules anymore. This was a carnival that belonged to the demons. Every huge black shadow rushed out of the ground with a low roar. Such a huge evil was enough to flatten the entire 3 realms and 6 Dao. Moreover, the man leading this group of demons was Beligaju, the emperor of the heavenly Dao that all the gods and Buddhas found difficult to deal with. The first wave of demons to be destroyed were the bandits who had done many evil deeds. It wasn't because Beligaju had a strong sense of justice. It was just that those bandits had bad lives. They could have blocked anyone, but they just had to block the royal who had just come out of the demon world. Hey, I say, your clothes are not bad. Take them off and I'll let you live. That group of bandits could be considered the most difficult to deal with in the desert. Every time they went to the surrounding towns to rob, they would hide in the desert. The imperial court had besieged them dozens of times but still couldn't take them down. Firstly, they were too cunning and familiar with desert warfare. Secondly, they were all very strong. Especially the leader of the bandits, who had a scar on his face. He looked like a fugitive. What? So scared that you can't even speak. The leader of the bandits looked at Beligaju in disdain. The group of people behind him on horseback laughed. However, before they could laugh enough, they saw many huge creatures behind Beligaju's black cloak in the wind. Each of them was huge, with blood-red eyes and fangs that were slightly exposed. They could tear them apart at any time. Beligaju just stood there. He didn't even look up. He just laughed softly. Every bandit felt the pain of their hearts exploding. The leader of the bandits had a twisted expression. With a bang, he fell from his horse into the desert in a bloody mess. The group of demons was like a darkness that could swallow all life. Inch by inch, they spread across the entire desert. The last two bandits who didn't ride a horse looked at this scene, trembling. Their legs went weak and they knelt on the ground. Originally, they couldn't keep their lives. However, at this moment, a gentle and elegant laugh sounded in the air. Chapter 867. As expected of the Emperor, you've helped me solve a huge problem. I've been looking for this group of robbers for a long time. I hate it when people touch my money. Unfortunately, I can't see, so I can't take revenge on them. The voice was very low, as if it was always smiling. However, isn't it too bloody to force me out like this? Bailey Jiaju looked back with an indifferent expression, only to see a man appear behind him. That man was dressed in a well-ironed tang suit. He was clearly walking in the wind and sand, but he was not stained by the slightest bit of dust. He seemed to be unable to see anything at all. His eyes were closed, and his eyelashes were very long. A bird landed on his shoulder. That bird seemed to be intelligent, looking at him with both eyes full of hostility. Apart from the bird, there was a small person behind him. The small person had dark circles under his eyes and was carrying a huge gourd on his back. Beligaju was familiar with this small person. It was the ghost baby who had followed Jing Wuxuang. However, he wasn't interested in why the ghost baby was following this man. Beligaju looked at the man and his eyes darkened. Where is she? Smart people didn't need to say too much when communicating with each other. Boss Pei smiled. I need to make a prediction. Even if it's a heavenly secret, I can only make a prediction after the variables appear. Upon hearing this, Beligaju's eyes landed on the Bodhi tree that the ghost baby was holding. Then, he lowered his eyes and bit off the black gloves on his hands. He bit his fair wrist, and the purest blood of the heavenly axiom dripped onto the Bodhi tree. Can you make a prediction now? Boss Pei couldn't see, but he was more transparent than people who could see. I thought that the Emperor wouldn't tolerate a love rival. I really don't want to see him. Beligaju's thin lips curled up coldly as he glanced at the Bodhi tree. So, Boss Pei, you better have the information that I want. Boss Pei didn't mind being threatened like this. He pointed at the bird on his shoulder with his slender fingers. After the bird flew away, he slowly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, countless strands of power formed into slender threads. Those threads floated in the air and then gathered together, interweaving into a vast and ancient seal. It was as if the gears of time were rapidly turning and calculating. The surrounding fiendish demons could not withstand such power at all. Their expressions were all twisted. However, Beligaju only focused on men's calculations. Finally, he captured the information he was looking for from within. What was that place? The house was built higher than the heavenly Tao. And big birds flying here and there. Why would she have these things around her? Could it be? Beligaju's pupils trembled as he recalled what Hellion Vivian had told him a long time ago. She once said that she wasn't the real eldest daughter of the Hellion family. Instead, it was a soul from 1,000 years in the future. She's back where she belongs. Boss Pei closed his eyes, and the calculation stopped. Obviously, that place doesn't belong to the divine mainland. Beligaju retracted his gaze. No, that place also belongs to the divine mainland. It's just that it's the divine mainland 1,000 years in the future. Boss Pei didn't deny it. Obviously, this was also within his calculations. That's all I can do. Next, I have to help the ghost baby awaken its master. As for the business this time, Emperor, remember to send the money outside the exorcist city. Someone will come and collect it. Fire Qilin looked at the disappearing figure in the desert. He vaguely felt uneasy from the depths of his heart. The divine mainland 1,000 years in the future. How would Master go there? Would he really have to wait 1,000 years to meet the princess consort? Master might not have the patience to wait until then. After so many years, no one could control what would happen to the princess consort. 1,000 years, such a period of time, even for them, was frighteningly dull. It was too long, so long that they couldn't accept it. It wasn't that they couldn't wait 1,000 years. They could go to the underworld and reincarnate. Perhaps it would be 1,000 years when they were reborn as a human. However, that method didn't suit Master at all. Moreover, no one knew the exact location of the princess consort. They couldn't be sure which year it would be. The most despairing thing was that only the King of Hell could travel through time in the underworld. This was a special characteristic that even the Grim Reaper couldn't do. Thinking of this, Fire Qilin subconsciously looked at Beligaju's expression. His face was covered by his long hair. Only a pair of scarlet eyes could be vaguely seen. They were like the sea of blood that had been emptied in the underworld, with layers and layers of blood flowing out. 1,000 years. Beligaju put down the hand that was supporting his face and laughed softly. His hoarse voice was filled with a unique evil and overbearing aura. Do they really think that they can stop me just like that? Master. Fire Qilin looked at him worriedly. Bailey Jiaju's pair of eyes had already started to show a gold tint of paranoia. Countless sand and dust soared within the gale. Those resentful spirits from the ghost town that were buried under the ground were all sucked into this unknown force. The underworld shook violently. It was more turbulent than ever before. Large rocks fell from the first hell to the 18th hell. Even the ghost envoys couldn't bear it and fell into the sea of blood. The little king of hell was still looking at himself in the mirror. As he looked at himself, a bump appeared on his head. He was instantly enraged. He slapped the ground and stood up. What the hell is going on? Can't you let me sculpt with peace of mind? What's wrong with the human world? His father always threw the matters of the underworld to him and didn't do his job properly. Little Highness. The judge crawled out strenuously and raised his head. Someone set up a blood formation in the human world. Blood formation. The little king of hell's handsome little face froze. He didn't bother to comb his hair and immediately stood up. It must be the great demon who set it up. He must have found the phoenix. Isn't the blood formation a formation that can tear apart time and space? I want to go there too. Little Highness, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. The judge desperately hugged the little king of hell's waist. The little king of hell kicked him away domineeringly. Dangerous my ass. I'm not the one who set up the formation. If it succeeds, I might be able to follow it to the modern world. Don't think that my father can extinguish my love for Little Hook just because he put me in the ancient world. the judge couldn't stop their little highness at all. If it wasn't for the Grim Reaper who appeared at the door in time, the little king of hell would definitely run away. If you go, you'll only be used as a sacrifice. The Grim Reaper stood at the door with a black notebook in his hand. He reached out and pushed up the glasses on his face. Don't forget about your physique, little seven. The little king of hell cursed in a low voice. His face was unusually fierce. From what you're saying, isn't the human world going to be destroyed? Chapter 868. The people of the underworld only care about the dead. We don't care about what happens to the human world. After saying that, the Grim Reaper stood aside and watched the black stone roll past his feet with an indifferent expression. He was as cold-blooded as ever. In the desert, the blood-colored array left a complicated and ancient mark on the ground. Countless demonic beasts and ghosts were sucked into the array. The moment they entered, they exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Then, this blood mist would quickly be transported to every line of the formation, lighting them up. A day and a night passed just like that. People watched as the demonic beasts on the ground were sucked into the thick clouds by some strange force. They had never seen such a terrifying force before. Many people began to kneel on the stone steps of the hidden spirit temple, burning incense and praying to Buddha. They wanted to disperse the black fog that covered the sky. However, to Beligaju, this power was still not enough. Just the demonic beasts as sacrifices was not enough to satisfy the blood array. Therefore, he began to catch the dead spirits. He let those evil spirits open the way for him. As a result, the black fog gathered and the sky grew larger and larger. The blood aura that soared into the sky eventually caused adverse reactions in the surroundings. The plague, snakes, and insects that were originally hiding in the ground crawled out. When the wild beasts that were originally living in the forest appeared in the capital, every citizen was so scared that their faces turned pale. Almost everyone knew that the heavens of the divine land were about to change. When demons were about to appear, there would be disaster. When the experienced exorcists saw this scene, they knew that something must be causing trouble. As members of the exorcist tribe, they could not just stand by and watch. Their first reaction was to gather a large group of exorcists and find the gathering place of the blood array to stop it. Evil creature. You'd better stop now. Otherwise, once the divine exorcism seal is activated, you won't be able to keep the last trace of your soul. Beligaju did not speak. He did not even look back. He just stood in the middle of the array with a gloomy expression. His handsome side profile was as cold as ice. Those old exorcists had never been ignored like this. They looked at each other and raised the peach with swords in their hands. Since you don't know how to repent at all, we can only enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. With that, the exorcists raised their feet and rushed toward Beligaju. Beligaju still didn't turn his head. He waved his sleeve. A loud bang was heard. The exorcists were all knocked to the ground by him. The exorcists were unconvinced. They clutched their aching chests and prepared to try again. Bailey Jiaju narrowed his eyes and reached out his hand in a certain direction. Suddenly, a high-level exorcist was grabbed by the throat by him. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wishes. With that said, Beligaju casually threw the exorcist into the array formation. Everyone's expression changed greatly. They quickly used the Nine Suns True chant in an attempt to use magic light to trap Beligaju in place, in order to shatter his soul. However, what they did not expect was that the magic light could not hurt the man standing opposite them at all. It was already too late for them to retreat. This was because every time the other party stretched out his hand, he would grab an exorcist. Regardless of whether they were low-level or high-level, they were all like ants in his hands. All of them were thrown into the blood array. Without Hellion Vivian, in Beligaju's eyes, humans were just seasonings when he was bored. He was a demon. Demons had never had a heart. Unexpectedly, there were exorcists joining the fray. The black fog and the blood array became thicker. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky, as if the end of the world was forming in an instant. However, in the face of such a phenomenon, Beligaju did not restrain himself at all. His deep eyes became even brighter, and his handsome features flowed with earth-shattering magic. Once the blood array was activated, all the living creatures in the surroundings would be attracted. Blood and spiritual energy were the nutrients that the array needed the most. Without giving the exorcists a chance to regret, as the last shell disappeared, a large cluster of black feathers suddenly erupted in the center of the blood array. It was as if there were wings flapping, piercing the sky. In the next moment, Beligaju walked out of the array. The black feathers fell under his feet as he walked. His entire body seemed to be shrouded in feathers. His devilishly handsome face made everyone feel apprehensive. Because a black hole appeared above Beligaju's head. No one knew where that black hole led to, but the wind that blew out of the black hole seemed to be able to suck everything in. At the beginning, the black hole was very small, but it became bigger and bigger as it went on. It was as if another world had appeared outside the layers of black fog. Fire Qilin looked at this scene, and its eyes widened. What was that? Unbelievable. Even as an ancient divine beast, it had never seen such a scene. Master actually tore open a gap in time and space in the air. But that world was too strange, so strange that it exceeded all of Fire Qilin's knowledge of the world. After the gap in time and space appeared, Beligaju did not act immediately. He seemed to be looking for something. The more he confirmed, the redder his eyes became. The earth began to shake violently. Those black feathers were like sharp blades that could cut through everything. One by one, they stabbed into the shells of the demonic beasts. The capital also felt the tremors. Almost all the demonic beasts in the entire divine land went berserk at the same time. In the billowing dust, Beligaju's gaze finally found a point in the illusionary clouds. Fire Qilin knew that even if he could tear open a gap in time and space, if he did not find the right place, his master would still not be able to touch the princess. Therefore, every time was like a gamble. Beligaju's side profile did not change at all. His eyes were tightly narrowed. The black fog that was originally shrouding the sky suddenly rushed down and enveloped his entire body. In addition to him, countless demons and devils were also caught up in it. Low growls were heard. Because of the unknown that they were about to face, their voices were full of trembling. Debeo was the smartest. From the beginning, he hugged Beligaju's left leg. There was no trace of fear on his angel-like handsome little face. Instead, it was hard to hide his excitement. After all, he was a demon. From the moment he was born, he had a strong desire for blood and destruction. The black fog grew bigger and bigger until it covered the entire ancient desert city. Bailey Jiaju and his entourage had completely disappeared from the divine mainland. Chapter 869. The death aura turned into a gale that raged in Sand City until the black hole in the sky disappeared completely. Boss Pei, who was standing in the distance, suddenly remembered a scene in Buddhism many years ago. At that time, the young man's spine was very straight even under the protection of the Vajra shield. The Buddha asked him if he wanted to convert. He just laughed mockingly, elegant and untamed. It was as if no one could subdue him. No matter how many difficulties there were in the future, he could flatten them all. No matter what kind of ferocious smile fate would show him, he would not lower his head either. And now, he was even more domineering and wanted to trample everything under his feet. What gave him such a strong and complete belief? Was it Phoenix? Boss Pei lowered his head and curved his thin lips. His eyes were still blind, but there was a playful smile at the corner of his mouth. I wonder if the Demon Emperor will be able to adapt to the modern divine land. 3 years later. Imperial City of Huaxia. The roads here had been repaired from 5 rings to 6 rings. Everywhere he went, there were cars. The property prices were rising very quickly. It was as if the price had doubled. Many people said that sometimes it was better to buy a commercial house than to work for half a year. They could sell it when the time came and make a net profit. Even in such an environment, the repair shop in the old town continued to operate as usual. Due to the special location of this car repair shop, the price had been raised to a sky-high level. But no matter how high the price was, the owner of the car repair shop would smile and say, "Not for sale." The car repair shop was very strange. When they were happy, the employees would repair more cars. When they were unhappy, they would just lie in the sports car and bask in the sun. Of course, the most common thing this group of rough men did was to act cute in front of a little boy. "Little boss, I got a new bottle of wine. Want a drink? How many times have I told you? You can't let a child drink." The most handsome man stretched out his leg and kicked a 1.9-meter tall man to the side. That kind of lethality really didn't match his well-known face. "Little boss, from today onwards, you'll officially start school. You must be able to withstand all kinds of temptations in the future. Otherwise, how can we feel at ease throwing you into that big dive vat of a school?" Under the sun, the little boy's face could not be seen clearly, but his voice could be heard. There was a coldness in his tender voice that was not found in other children his age. "It's just a kindergarten. The kindergarten is even more dangerous." The suited man looked at the boy seriously and said, "Little boss, you don't understand. With your looks, even Auntie won't let you off. She will definitely want to stuff you into her pocket and take you away. Not to mention those little kids who are close to their beautiful peers." "Yes, yes, yes, yes." The car owners standing at the side nodded in agreement. Since there were men in suits in the garage, the people who came to repair the cars were mostly girls. Every one of them wore denim shorts, had long legs, and an all-shaped face. Even for people like them who would subconsciously frown when they saw children, when they saw the little boy, they couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch his little face. Heavens, what kind of parents could give birth to such a handsome boy? Especially the temperament he had. It was all so strange. Logically speaking, he was raised by rough men who repaired cars. But this child had a cute and noble air about him, like a little prince left behind by a noble family. Now, the little boy was carrying a school bag and wearing a pure white shirt with a black bow tie tied on it. He had soft short hair, deep eyebrows, and extremely bright eyes, like diamonds in the night sky, so clear that people couldn't help but look again and again. Olde also felt that it was too dangerous to let such a little boss go to school, so he suggested with a cigarette in his mouth, "If you want me to say, why not just stay in the garage and not go to kindergarten? Isn't it just learning math problems? Little boss can even." Woo, woo. Before Olde could finish his words, the suited man covered his mouth. "Are you stupid? Do you want everyone to know that our little boss is a child prodigy? Be careful, the boss will come out and kill you later. Speaking of which, why hasn't the boss come out yet? He must be sleeping in again." The little boy held his forehead with his small hand, as if he had a headache. When he spoke, his small canine teeth were exposed. "I'll go up and wake Mom up. Uncle Olde, go prepare the milk. Mom wants to drink it when she wakes up." That was why species were so mysterious. It was really not easy for a group of rough men to raise a considerate little gentleman. Because the little boy was still very young, his walk was not very stable. He carried his small backpack and swayed as he walked up the stairs with his short little legs. Then, he climbed onto the 2-meter-wide white bed with a chuckle. The person under the blanket didn't open her eyes. She held the little boy in her arms and then used her straight and small nose to sniff the little boy. The smell of milk on my son's body. Not bad, it smells very good. Obviously, the little boy was used to his mother's way of greeting. He sighed helplessly. Beauty Wei, although I want you to stay in bed, it's already 8 o'clock. There's still half an hour before your son reports to kindergarten. Shouldn't you consider washing your face and brushing your teeth now? Your sounds very good. Helian Wei finally opened her eyes and placed her son beside her. Little Qingchen, as someone who has been to school before, let me tell you something. As someone who is about to become a student, you must do 3 things in order to make your life perfect. 1 is to fall in love, and the other 2 are to play truant and be late. Since the weather is so good today, why don't you do the late thing while you're at it? When the car owners outside the window heard this, they took a step forward and almost tripped over their own high heels. Damn, who educates a child like this? It was not easy for the little prince of the car industry to not be led astray. Unfortunately, Helian Vivian herself didn't think there was anything wrong with her education. She firmly instilled the idea of being a domineering CEO into her son. The little boy reached out a finger and softly poked Helian Vivian's cheek. His eyes lit up as he asked, "Then did you and Dad meet when you were in school?" Helian Wei paused for a moment, the corners of her mouth curled up into a smile as she recalled the process of her meeting with Bailey Jiaju. She yawned and with a lazy voice, she let out a sound. The little boy asked again, "Then who wooed who first?" This time, Helian Vivian answered straightforwardly, "Of course I wooed him. As a domineering CEO, how can I let my other half confess first?" After hearing this reason, the little boy was deeply silent. Had no one ever told Mom that she had a problem with her self-image? Chapter 870. Oh right, if you meet someone you like in school, don't hold back. Remember that you're the son of an arms tycoon. When it's time to make a move, make a move. You can't let others waste good resources, Helian Wei said as she held little Bun in her arms and ravaged him. The little boy saved himself with great difficulty. His black hair curled up, and like a little adult, he handed the jeans on the chair to Helian Vivian. Pretty Vivian, I'm in kindergarten, not high school. It's too early to talk about liking someone. You have to start dating when you're young. Helian Wei casually pulled a pure black headband and tied up her long hair. That face, no matter when you looked at it, would always make people feel that it was breathtaking. She revealed a very serious expression. First of all, you must find a beautiful one. The little boy handed her the milk he had prepared. Pretty Vivian, don't tell me that you liked my dad's face back then. What else could it be? Helian Vivian reached out to pinch her son's little ears. She lazily stretched her waist. Other than his face, his body is not bad. And his voice. Children shouldn't ask so much. The little Bun. Did I ask around? Mom was the one who was willing to tell me. Ever since he was young, his bedtime stories were either general knowledge on how to dismantle a sniper rifle or the specific plot of how his mom pursued his dad. For this, his mom had even written a so-called wife-chasing handbook. He had read that handbook before. Every time he read it, he felt that his dad, whom he had never met, was definitely a very sinister person. To be pursued by a woman with such a clear conscience, and to throw out bait from time to time so that his mom would be more proactive. A man like this was very difficult to deal with. Little Chinchin, why are you in a daze? Let's go. Hellion Vivian patted the little bun's head. In order to wear matching outfits with her son, she was also wearing a shirt today. However, perhaps it was because of her outstanding face, pure black leather pants matched with a clean white shirt and a boy London soft leather cap. Under her waist-length chestnut hair was a black diamond ear stud. She looked very cool and eye-catching. There were even car owners who came to Xiaoqing to ask her if she was a T. After all, such a girl was always too eye-catching. That kind of beauty that blurred gender was really hard to ignore. In addition, she had a BMW Tomahawk that made people want to scream when they saw it. Whether it was the color or the lines of the heavy-duty motorcycle, it was extremely cool. There weren't many women who could drive an S1000RR unless they had long legs. Otherwise, they would be suppressed by the aura emitted by the car. However, for Hellion Vivian, the BMW Tomahawk was tailor-made for her. While supporting the car with her long legs, Hellion Vivian raised her right hand and pulled down the windshield with a snap. Many people couldn't take their eyes off them. The little boy was sitting in front of her, wearing the little helmet that Hellion Vivian had specially made for him. He was so handsome. This pair of mother and son seemed to be born to be a scenery line, galloping on the road in a flashy manner. The pedestrians on the road couldn't help but look back, especially the group of people who loved cars. Even if they were sitting in sports cars, they couldn't help but open the windows and whistle outside. This car is so cool. BMW Tomahawk, it's out of production, right? Look, the person riding the bike is a woman. Impossible. Do you think the Tomahawk is your family's scooter that anyone can ride casually? The driver who was knocked felt very wronged and bit his thin lips. That was really a woman riding the bike, okay? However, Hellion Vivian didn't stay on the road for long. The Tomahawk's speed was well known, especially when she bent down and sped up. People could only see the beautiful fiery curves flashing in front of their eyes valiantly. Hiss! Hellion Vivian parked the motorcycle, took off the helmet, and carried the little bun down. Your kindergarten is not bad. The kindergarten system in the capital was very complete, especially this one. Basically, they were all talents, so her son shouldn't be bored in there. The little boy was very happy to be able to come to the kindergarten. He reached out and tugged at Hellion Vivian, reminding her in a very well-mannered manner, "When I'm in class, you can't just run around. I'll end class at 5, then I'll go back by myself." Wait a minute, little Chinchin, I feel that there's something wrong with you. Usually, don't you ask me to pick you up? Hellion Vivian raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to do something behind my back? The little boy touched his forehead. I just want to walk by myself. Well, little Chinchin has learned to be independent. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she looked in the direction the little boy was looking at. There was a faint shadow there. The shadow was very small, and it was squatting in the shadow of the school gate. It was a child who had just died not long ago. Of course, the child also saw the little boy looking at him. His eyes suddenly widened, and he bounced over, extremely surprised. You can see me? You can actually see me. Hellion Vivian curled her lips into a smile, showing that she didn't want to care. Her eyes lazily looked at her son. The little bun was calm. I can see you, but if you don't go reincarnate and keep on harming others, I don't mind sending you on your way. When the little black shadow heard this, he knew that the other party was not to be trifled with. He originally wanted to reach out his small hand to touch the other party. Unexpectedly, as soon as he moved, a black dog appeared behind the little boy. The black dog was frighteningly big. Its eyes were as red as blood, and its whole body was emitting a thick black fog. Although the little black shadow had just died, he was at least a ghost. His innate ghost instinct told him that it was best to leave now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a good ending. Thus, the little black shadow turned around in fear and completely disappeared. Helene Vivian lowered her head and helped her son tidy up the small tie on his shirt. Dead spirits are formed by resentment. Be careful. Yes. The little boy replied, but in reality, he didn't care about these ghosts at all. His bloodline destined him to be arrogant. Hurry up and go back. The car dealership's business hasn't been good recently. If you don't work hard, I won't be able to pay for my school fees. The little boy said this because the mother and son had the same concept of money. That was to make money for fun. However, in the ears of others, it had a different meaning. Wei Wei, why are you so miserable? I really didn't expect that the belle of the law faculty couldn't even pay for her son's school fees. Chapter 871. Hearing this, Helene Vivian playfully raised her eyebrows and looked in the direction of the voice. She saw a well-dressed lady standing not far away. She had a bag in her left hand and an extremely fat boy in her right hand. The boy was indeed too fat, and he didn't forget to eat ice cream. Perhaps it was a problem with his education, but the little fatty's gaze was very unkind. He was more or less tainted by his mother's aura, and he looked at everyone with an arrogant gaze. Mom, where did this country bumpkin come from? He looked a little older than Helene Chinchin, and when he spoke, he didn't forget to glance in Helene Vivian's direction. The lady laughed softly, and the charm in her voice was obvious. What country bumpkin? He's a classmate of Mom's when she was in school. He's just a little down now. Don't look down on them, understand? Down. The little boy smiled and didn't want to talk to this kind of person. He looked at Helene Vivian and said, Beauty Vivian, I'll go in first. Remember what I said, don't run around. Helene Vivian always felt that her son's expression sometimes resembled a certain highness, so she nodded and didn't say anything. Seeing their reaction, the lady suddenly laughed. Vivian, we haven't seen each other for 3 years. Back then, you were a famous person in school. Life really makes a man. I thought you went to be a lawyer somewhere, but now it seems that's not the case. Helene Vivian looked at her and her smile deepened. Yes, I didn't become a lawyer. Why? Is it important? That's not it. When the lady spoke, she always gave people a very elegant atmosphere. It's just that we haven't seen each other in a long time, and I wanted to talk to you about the old days. Hee, since you're not a lawyer, what are you doing? Helene Wei Wei looked at her son swaying back as he walked into the kindergarten. There was no need for her to stay any longer at the entrance of the kindergarten. She nonchalantly said to the rich lady, I'm here to repair the car. Repair the car. The woman's tone changed strangely, and then she laughed again. That's really hard work, Wei Wei. My husband has invested in this kindergarten, and now he is also a director of the school. If you need any help, just tell me. Sometimes, self-esteem is not worth much. Helene Vivian yawned. No need. She still had that calm expression on her face. The rich lady remembered that she had always been like this during her university years. She always missed classes and seemed very mysterious. However, when she appeared, she would always steal everyone's limelight. There were many people who chased after Helene Vivian in university. There were so many of them that the rich lady still felt a little angry when she thought about it now. However, if those people were to find out that a top law student had been reduced to fixing cars for others, what kind of scene would that be? It seemed that it was time to find a time to gather with everyone. The noblewoman handed the bag in her hand to the housekeeper behind her, and then said to the little fatty, Son, if anyone bullies you, you must tell Mom, understand? Listen to your teacher and don't eat during class. Then come and pick me up when I'm done with class. The little fatty was very clingy, and his mouth twitched. Why is there such a country bumpkin in the school that Dad invested in? He's even more handsome than me. My limelight has been stolen by him. The rich lady smiled. All right, we're not from the same world. Besides, how is our family Xiao Hang worse than him? He's a head taller than him. Hearing the praise, the little fatty raised his head and puffed out his chest. However, the passers-by who were watching this scene chuckled. They thought to themselves, your son is indeed taller than others. Why don't you say that your son is 3 times fatter than the other person? As for the appearance, anyone with eyes could see that the difference was too big. There was no comparison at all. If a child was raised astray, they would be more vicious than adults. For example, when little fatty Ching saw Helian Chingchen's face, he was so angry that he purposely said that he was a mechanic in front of the whole class. Helian Chingchen didn't even acknowledge him. His big, black eyes were rolling around. From afar, there wasn't anything special about them. However, upon closer inspection, they were different from ordinary people. From his pupils, there were lines of golden lines, just like the eyes of a cat. They were unbelievably bright. The strands of hair in front of his forehead were neatly trimmed. They just happened to follow his movements of lowering his eyes, blocking them and covering his eyes. Xiaohei, come back. No one heard her order. Other than the devil dog that wanted to tear the little fatty into pieces with its claws, the rest of the people could not see anything. The little one reached out and touched the devil dog's leg. Her small body could only reach the dog's thigh. I can't let someone die when I just came to school. Besides, school is quite boring. It's not bad to have a toy like this. As she said that, Helian Chingchen smiled faintly with a unique arc. The little radishes were very cute. After the first class, all of them rested on the small desks. Helian Chingchen was also sleeping. Her tender little face was extremely cute. Soon, a little girl came to give him candy. She also wanted to wait with him for the adults to come and pick him up after school. Little fatty Ching was very unhappy. After class, he gathered a few of his friends and surrounded Helian Chingchen. Country bumpkin, I'm warning you. You better listen to me and call me boss. Otherwise, I'll make sure you don't get away scot-free. Little fatty Ching was the oldest among them. When he spoke, he mimicked the tone of an adult. Helian Chingchen stared at the lollipop that was dropped by her feet. Beauty Wei Wei only allowed him to eat candy once a week so that he would not have worms in his teeth. This piece of candy was so hard to come by, but it was gone just like that. Good, very good. Helian Chingchen looked at little fatty Ching. Her canine teeth gradually revealed, as if something was gathering in his eyes. At this moment, the teacher walked in from the door. She clapped her hands and said in a cute voice, "All right, children, it's almost time for lunch. Hurry up and line up. It's time to eat." Helian Chingchen immediately regained his senses. He could not cause trouble in school. If he wanted to teach someone a lesson, he had to wait until they were outside the school gate. Otherwise, Beauty Wei Wei would find out. Then, he would lose more than he gained. Thinking of this, Helian Chingchen retracted his aura. Holding his small rice bowl, he walked towards the group with a chuckle. He was the smallest and shortest, so he would definitely be at the front of the line. Little fatty Ching looked at him and thought that he had completely frightened him. He was very pleased with himself. During lunch, he ate 3 big bowls of rice in a row. Just as Helian Chingchen was eating in a daze, a pure black Lamborghini sports car arrogantly stopped at the entrance of the kindergarten. Chapter 872. A butler in a black uniform respectfully opened the back door. A small and cool figure slowly walked out of the sports car. This made the teachers, who had stopped and were walking over, suck in a deep breath. The little boy was wearing a leather jacket with a cap on his head, covering half of his face. He even wore sunglasses on his face, as if he didn't like the sun. But even so, people could clearly see his appearance. He was as white as snow, and his black hair fell from the hood to the side of his ears. It was very smooth and dark. His slender and beautiful little fingers moved back and forth a few times as he casually looked around. His eyes moved back and forth on the passers-by, focusing on their body shape and fat thickness. "It looks delicious." The little boy stood beside the car, tilting his head slightly and smiling. It was a very ordinary action, but when he did it, there was an indescribable evil, as if some kind of dark aura was overflowing from his ruby-like eyes. The passing teachers didn't know what he said, but they were surprised that there was such a cool little boy in the world. It was as if he had walked out of a manga, and they couldn't help but look back. The little boy was used to being looked at since he was young, so he wasn't sensitive to such gazes at all. When he saw that someone was looking at him, he even looked at the shadows of the kindergarten. He looked up and down, and stuck out his tongue to lick his thin lips. To be honest, he looked like a flashy little rich second generation. The little black shadow in the shadows didn't take him seriously. But what he didn't know was that after Bailey Shangxia licked his thin lips, he softly spat out 2 words, "I want to eat." The little black shadow wanted to scare him like he did others, so when Bailey Shangxia approached him, he had already reached out his black fingernails, ready to pinch him. However, he never would have thought that the seemingly harmless little rich kid would release an evil aura that he had never felt before in the next moment. He wanted to run, but it was too late. He was eaten in one bite. After the little rich second generation finished his dessert, he put his sunglasses back on his face and said domineeringly, "This time, Father is sure that Mother is in this space-time, and in the East." "Yes, Your Highness." When the butler in black lowered his eyes, the tip of his tongue was diamond-shaped. "This is already the 8th kindergarten that Little Highness has entered. His Highness has instructed that if Little Highness is expelled this time, he will strip you naked and hang you in both the human and demon realms for a human body aesthetic exhibition." The little rich second generation sneered and lifted the small school bag on his shoulder. He sneered heavily and didn't say anything. The butler in black became nervous and said into the Bluetooth headset in his ear, "What should we do if His Highness catches a cold?" "To get an injection." But every time the Little Highness had an injection, it would frighten the nurses. "Tell His Highness, yes. We must inform His Highness." The corner of the little rich kid's mouth twitched, and his voice was very cool. "I just sneezed. That's enough. Go back to where you came from. Don't disturb me when I go to school to recruit underlings." Demons were born with a desire to control power. This was even more so for the little rich second generation. He had never put anyone in his eyes. If his father hadn't told him that his mother didn't like them killing humans, he would have eaten these people's souls long ago. The little rich second generation put his hands in his pockets, and the corners of his mouth always carried a smile. It was just that that smile was too bloodthirsty. Those who didn't know him would only think of him as a little angel. In fact, his appearance had already made the demons in a radius of dozens of miles feel a strong sense of uneasiness. The little rich second generation had already forgotten that he was in his mother's belly. However, in his memory, there was always a pair of gentle hands that would caress her belly from time to time. At that time, he would always be with what, he couldn't remember, but the little rich second generation knew that it was a very, very happy feeling. Therefore, even he wanted to find his mother as soon as possible. However, he was different from his father. Besides his mother, he had other interests, and that was to make his peers fear him. Humans were just toys to be played with. They were greedy, timid, and vain. They would always revere those who were richer and more powerful than them. Just like his father said, if he wanted to call the wind and summon the rain in this era, he must first successfully disguise himself as a human and then stand at the top of the pyramid. The little rich second-generation kid laughed again, letting his head teacher hold his little hand as they walked into their small classroom in a very, very cool manner. This is the new Bailey Shangxia. He just came back from abroad. In the future, when the children learn English songs, Shangxia can lead the singing. The teacher introduced, but she still couldn't hide the amazement in her eyes. In the capital, there were countless wealthy families. However, there were only a dozen or so people whom the headmaster had personally instructed, and the one she was holding was one of those dozen or so people. When the children in the classroom heard that the other party came back from abroad, they bit their little fingers and tilted their heads. A foreigner. When it came to beautiful things, children would always actively surround them. They looked at the little rich second generation adorably and innocently, wanting to be friends with him. However, there was only one person who furrowed his little brows when the little rich second generation appeared. Why was there such a strong evil aura? Could it be that he was a demon? No, if he was a demon, he would definitely be able to tell. Little Qingqian's eyes narrowed even more. Of course, the little rich second generation noticed her gaze. He looked in her direction without any reservation. His eyes were filled with a dangerous aura. From the moment he came in, he realized that there was something wrong with this human. Although he couldn't tell what was wrong with the other party, the feeling was too mysterious. The little rich second generation also narrowed his eyes. The two children were filled with hostility even before they spoke a word. This was the best news for little Fatty Ching. When he saw the clothes on the little rich second generation, he knew that the other party was rich, just like him. Little Fatty Ching had been influenced by his mother since he was young. Although he was still young, he was already subconsciously scheming against others. Therefore, after the teacher left, he took the initiative to bring the two children behind him to stand in front of the little rich second-generation heir during the class break. Shangxia, do you also dislike that little country bumpkin? I heard my mother ask what his family does. He's a broken car mechanic and is extremely poor. Chapter 873. When Bailey Shangxia heard little Fatty Chang's words, he raised his blood-red eyes but did not do anything. This made little Fatty Ching twitch his mouth. Under normal circumstances, when one heard that the other party was so poor, wouldn't one join him in scolding them? Shangxia, we have discussed and decided to join forces with you to teach that little country bumpkin a lesson. Little Fatty Ching continued to encourage the little rich kid with all his might. After he finished speaking, he even looked at little Qingqian with disdain. Bailey Shangxia sneered. He did not look like a 3-year-old child at all. Instead, he looked like a little boss in a movie. Did I say that I would join forces with you? Get the hell out of here. You. Little Fatty Ching was the king of children everywhere he went. Who dared to talk to him like that? Bailey Shangxia did not want to waste time with him. He hated it when people pointed at him. He grabbed little Fatty Chang's collar and pulled him over. I will give you 2 choices now. Either you become my underling or I beat you up. This human's soul was rotten from head to toe. If it was any other time, he would not even look at him. However, he still needed a human to run errands for him in kindergarten. Little Fatty Ching chuckled. Be your little brother. He thought to himself, look at my body. I can beat 3 of you. You want me to be your underling? There was no room for discussion. Little Fatty Ching twisted his body and was about to grab Bailey Shangxia's hair and elbow him in the stomach. Children did not have any rules when they fought. Little Fatty Ching relied on his fat, strong, and powerful family. Therefore, he did not think too much when he bullied others. He was very ruthless. But what he didn't expect was that before his hand could even touch the corner of the little rich kid's shirt, he was pushed away by the other party and fell heavily to the ground. Little Fatty Ching was dizzy from the fall. His eyes were filled with stars. However, that person did not stop. He stepped on his stomach with his short legs and said in a cold voice, "Do you think you are fit to fight with me?" Little Fatty Ching was in so much pain that he burst out crying. When the class teacher rushed to the classroom, she saw this scene. Her small face turned pale in an instant. She quickly reached out and pulled little Fatty Ching up. She actually wanted to hug him, but little Fatty Ching's body was too big. She could only half hug and half drag him. Little Fatty Ching cried even more heartbreakingly because the adults were around. "Teacher, Shang Xie, he hit me." The head teacher patted his back and coaxed him for a long time. Then, she turned around and said to Bailey Shangxie, "How can you hit him?" "Teacher." Bailey Shangxie smiled at little Fatty Ching. His eyes were filled with a dangerous light. "Student Cheng was the one who started it. I was just defending myself." When the homeroom teacher heard that the child even said that it was a real defense, and then looked at the two children's figures, she didn't know what to say. After all, little Fatty Ching was too big and burly. With such a figure and appearance, it was obvious that he often bullied others. No matter what, children should still be peaceful with each other. "You can't fight." The homeroom teacher wanted them to shake hands and make peace. However, little Fatty Ching burst into tears. "Teacher, if you don't care about him, I will definitely tell my dad. Someone hit me in school and you didn't even do anything about it. I will ask my dad to remove you from your position." The homeroom teacher was teaching the class for the second year. Although she wasn't very righteous, she was at least a kind person. When she heard that this child was using his parents to pressure her, her face turned serious. "Then go and tell your dad and ask him to remove me from my position." Little Fatty Ching was dumbfounded. He thought that by saying this, the other party would definitely know the severity of the matter. He didn't expect that it was useless. He was stunned for a while before he burst into tears again. The homeroom teacher didn't really want to be angry with a child. She couldn't let him continue crying like this, so she called his parents to pick him up. During the third lesson, little Fatty Ching was completely obedient. He didn't dare to look at Bailey Shangxie. Whenever he looked at him, he would feel a terrible stomachache. Little young Master Ching had never been so aggrieved. He was originally the king of the children in the class. However, when Bailey Shangxie came, he was nothing. Not only that, he was beaten up, but the teacher didn't even punish him. Most importantly, fucking hell. What did legitimate self-defense mean? Little Fatty Chang's IQ couldn't keep up with Bailey Shangxie. However, it didn't mean that the other children couldn't keep up with him. Little Qingchen, for example, sat in front of his little desk, biting on the lollipop in his mouth and watching this scene silently. Then, he obediently took out the chocolate cake that Beauty Weiwei had prepared for him. If he remembered correctly, legitimate self-defense wasn't an idiom that a 3-year-old child should learn. It seemed that the other party wasn't a low-level monster. He should have perfectly integrated into human life. Beauty Weiwei said that this kind of monster was the most difficult to deal with, because it was uncertain whether the other party simply wanted to live as a human or did something bad. No matter what, as long as the other party didn't provoke him, he wouldn't make a move. But for some reason, he always felt that the other party wasn't a monster. Demons always had a pungent smell on them. But this person, other than looking very rich, was no different from an ordinary human. Moreover, the small leather jacket he was wearing looked very good. It was the one that little Qingchen had always wanted. "Little Black, can you see the other party's real body?" Little Qingchen asked in a low voice, wanting to summon the devil dog. However, something strange happened. Little Black didn't appear. This had never happened before. Little Chinchin's eyes darkened as he looked at Bailey Shangxia. His little face became serious as he ate the chocolate cake. He looked adorable no matter how one looked at him. Bailey Shangxia, this little devil, had a secret that no one knew, and that was that he liked to eat chocolate very, very much. Under normal circumstances, he was very disdainful of humans, but when it came to eating, he had to admit that humans were very good at making things. They could even make such delicious food like chocolate. No matter how cool Bailey Shangxia was, he was still just a child. When little Chinchin took out the chocolate cake, his blood-red eyes kept looking to the side. Little Chinchin, of course, sensed the other party's gaze. Without a word, he hugged his chocolate cake even tighter and ate it spoonful by spoonful, exuding an air of nobility. Bailey Shangxia felt that this human didn't know what to do at all. His eyes narrowed, and he made up his mind to accept the other party as his little brother. Even if it was for the chocolate cake, he would beat the other party into submission. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.